Recording in progress.
Dean, Emerson, Madeline, Milo, and Delaney. We have a speaker on back there somewhere. I'm mute. Perfect. Hello. Okay. All right. Nope. Oh, still somebody. One of the computers at the back there.
I think we're good now.
Okay. The students from Cabrillo School, Dane, Emerson, Madeline, Milo, and Delaney, are here to do the flag salute and the land acknowledgement. Here's our flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and now the land acknowledgement.
The Pacifica School District acknowledges that we gather on the unceded ancestral homelands of the Ramaytush Ohlone people. As guests, we humbly extend our gratitude to the Ramaytush Ohlone elders and community. We recognize the benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland, and we affirm their sovereign rights as First People.
As the original stewards of this land, the Ramaytush Ohlone understand the interconnectedness of all things and the importance of maintaining harmony with nature. Likewise, Pacifica School District commits to teaching our school community how to be responsible stewards of this land.
Do you want them to explain their picture?
Okay, yes.
Hi, my name is Madeline, and I'm a second grader in Miss Farrell's 2-3 class. I am learning math, reading, and spelling. Some of the math is multiplication. For example, 7 times 5 is 35. And my favorite book is Smile. And I like Cabrillo because I love all my teachers, the ones in the past, the ones now, and I know I'm going to love the ones in the future. And it's so exciting.
My name is Emmy. I love Cabrillo because I love doing new things, and I love learning, and I love art. And we made this art project when we had partners and we drew them sideways.
Oh,
Hi, my name is Delaney, and I'm in 5th grade, and Miss Sanchik is my teacher. I like Cabrillo because of the great community. I moved to Cabrillo this year, and so far I've had a great experience. On the first day of school, I met so many new people and was not expecting to meet one of my best friends. All the teachers are so welcoming, and they make complex information easier to understand and learn. I have many good friends among my peers, and I know I'll get better and more opportunities to meet new people. At my old school, I would not be able to do a fun project called Famous Americans. Famous Americans is fun to work on because you can learn a lot about a famous person you may not know much about. My famous American is Susan B. Anthony, who is a strong fighter for women's suffrage. I would have not known who Susan B. Anthony was if I was at a different school in 5th grade. Overall, this 2022 through 2023 school year has been joyful and exhilarating. I can't wait to learn and grow my education in a fun new way.
Hello, my name is Milo Accarelli, and I'm a 5th grader at Cabrillo Elementary. A couple of reasons I like being a 5th grader at Cabrillo Elementary are because of the awesome projects and the fun teachers. At school, we are currently working on a Famous American project. The Famous American project is where you are randomly assigned a famous American to research, study, and present. I got Fred Rogers. I think this is a really fun way to learn about people. The teachers are great too. They teach lessons that are fun and really motivate students to learn. They are kind and supportive, and when I need something or make mistakes, they are always there to help. I love being a student at Cabrillo, and I never want to miss a day of school there.
Hi, my name is Dan Grahowski. I'm an 8th grader at Cabrillo. I like Cabrillo because the teachers are able to get you engaged in the topics that we do. The teachers have the skill to turn a boring lesson into something that you actually enjoy and want to learn. I would like to tell you about the elective program we have at Cabrillo. Each Thursday, 7th and 8th graders have electives. They are so fun because you can hang out with your friends and enhance a new skill. My elective is pickleball, and I really like it. The teacher, Brad, is a really nice guy. Another great thing about Cabrillo is Family Day. I believe Family Day is a great thing because you have one student from K through 8 in a group and do projects. It may not sound like much, but the little kids get to interact with the big kids. And when I was little, I loved to hang out with the big kids. Last but not least, I would like to introduce my teachers. My math teacher, Mr. Potter, is an encouraging teacher because math is hard, and he does a good job at explaining it. My ELA teacher, Miss Schweier, is a veteran teacher and loves what she does. She is super funny and talented. My science teacher is Mr. Uribe. He does an amazing job of teaching science. He knows so much. You can ask him anything and he will know the answer. Last but not least, my history teacher, Miss Ellsburn, is also an awesome teacher because she is so prepared and gets straight to the point for our work. Cabrillo is a great school, and I'm glad I've been able to be a student here.
Everybody's grabbing for their All right. Anyone else? All right. Can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy days to be here on this rainy day. It really gives us some great perspective of what's happening at your school. So thank you very much. We appreciate you being here. You're welcome to stay until the entire meeting ends at probably 10:30, but we also accept that maybe you have some homework to do. So thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks for being here. Nicole, do you want to report out on the car that's beeping?
I can only tell you it's not.
It's off.
Okay. Everyone was driving to the Carla Chavez Torres is unfortunately not here. She had to run out of state for a family member that is a family emergency, so she's not here. It's not really appropriate that we would elevate her as a panelist. She doesn't have any things on the agenda. We didn't agendize it. Just know that she's sitting in the audience. So, okay.
All right. Barbara, we need to take the roll call, please.
Trustee Burdell? Here. Trustee Burkini?
Here?
Trustee Doddy? Here. Trustee Patel?
Here.
Trustee Villalobos?
Here.
All right. The board met in closed session regarding public employee performance evaluation, titled in Superintendent. The board voted 5-0 to approve the superintendent's evaluation. Let's see.
Minutes?
Yeah, just kind of jumps in. So are there any questions regarding the minutes of December 7th, 2022? Questions? Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of December 7th, 2022?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of December 7th.
And a second?
I'll second.
All right. Barbara, will you take the vote?
Yes, all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, next on to the minutes of December 14th, 2022. Are there any questions regarding these minutes? All right, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of December 14th, 2022?
A motion to approve the minutes from December 14th, 2022.
I'll second.
Okay, Barbara, will you take the vote?
Yes, all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, approval of the agenda and the consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda will be approved with one motion, which is not debatable and which requires a unanimous vote for passage. If any member of the board, the superintendent, or the public so request, any item shall be removed from the section and placed in the regular order of business following approval of the consent agenda. Okay, did we just approve those minutes? Sorry, my thing's off here a little bit. Okay, are there any questions regarding the agenda and consent agenda?
The only thing I would say about the agenda, and I just say this to the audience, is that we are going to work very hard to stop at 8:05 to take a break, and then at 8:15 is we would welcome the conversation about the superintendent search. And then I think it's going to be a long meeting from there on out. So to the degree that we can kind of keep the agenda moving, that would be fantastic.
All right. Are there any questions regarding the agenda and consent agenda? All right, do I have a motion to approve the agenda and consent agenda?
I'll motion to approve.
And a second?
I'll second.
All right, Barbara, will you take the vote?
Yes, all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes 5-0.
All right, communications. Speakers wishing to address the board on agenda items or non-agenda items, please submit your first and last name and agenda item you wish to speak on in the Q&A area of the webinar. Please do not submit comments or questions in the Q&A area. You'll be called to address the board, your microphone will be unmuted, and you may speak for up to 3 minutes. After you've spoken, your microphone will be muted. Our first speaker tonight is from LSEA. I think.
Are we connected?
Yes, we are.
Right. We are pleased to report we had another successful negotiation session last week. Our focus was the working conditions and impacts around the lack of substitute teachers. We created a Band-Aid that will expire in June. I'm not sure our problem will be healed come next school year, but at least it's a start. We are halfway through the second trimester. The 100th day of school will be here before we know it. These markers in the calendar signal it is time for the administrative task to begin to start planning for next school year. LSEA looks forward to working with our Director of HR to make sure teachers are properly assigned, positions staffed, and we are ready for the upcoming school year. LSEA also looks forward to assisting with the search for our next superintendent. This is no easy task for our school board members to take on. Please know LSEA and CSEA members look forward to assisting in any capacity possible. The hiring of this candidate directly impacts our entire school district. We look forward to the honor of helping all of us find our next leader. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Thank you. All right, next our representative from CSE.
All right. Hello, my name is Nicole Sayers. I'm the president of CSEA. Tonight, I'd like to take a second to acknowledge that we've all been through a lot through this last month with the succession of cyclonic atmospheric rivers. Some of us have had trees fall on our properties, blocking driveways. Some lost power, and others simply felt the anxiety of not knowing what to expect the next day as the next storm came. Just a reminder that we all do not know what other people are going through, and to think about our actions and how we say things to others. Now I'd like to welcome Enid Zimmerman, a new paraprofessional at Ortega, Leda Lopez, a custodial 2 worker at Ortega, and Marilupi Alakate Pathi, a van driver. Our Above and Beyond project, we had nobody for November, so we have 4 for this month. They are, I'm going to mess up the name, I think, but Rola Abase, okay, thank you. Nicole Ortega, Michelle Pym, and Bill Armstrong. Rola, Cabrillo School Assistant, who for weeks before the winter break, stepped up and took on the responsibility of making sure Cabrillo's school office ran smoothly and that all their needs were met. Nicole Ortega, Student Services Administrative Secretary, who gets goes above and beyond every day with her and her coworkers call her super duper duty. Michelle Pym, Special Education Administrative Secretary, for her work and dedication to our special education staff and students and their families. Bill Armstrong, Maintenance, who always covers at a moment's notice as a van driver to make sure that our students get to and from school. This is always in addition to his regular FM&O duties, and it takes him beyond his regular workday. I'm very, very proud to announce that after 6 years of working without an updated contract, CSEA has finalized and printed the new 2022 to 2025 collective bargaining agreement. We will be distributing them to CSEA members next Monday, the 23rd, at Luigi's Pizza on Lindemar Boulevard from 5:30 to 8. We encourage all members to stop by and get their contracts, have a slice of pizza, and talk to the e-board and negotiation team about questions or issues that they may have. And lastly, tonight, I would like to recognize the resignation of our superintendent, Heather Olson, and I want the board to know that CSEA and LSEA want to help in this transition, to make this transition as smooth as possible, and to let you know that we are happy to be a part of the process so it goes very successfully. And thank you for your time.
All right, do we have any people wishing to address the board?
So there is one person who wishes to address the board during, and is asking if it's a good time or should she wait for the superintendent search. So since there is an item 11F, that's when we will bring her forward to address the board.
Okay. Okay, great. Correspondence.
I do not have any correspondence.
Okay, and board and superintendent communications.
Other than the work study last week, I really don't have anything.
Okay. And with the work study last week, there hasn't been much since that, but I want to put a plug in for the band concert tomorrow night for Cabrillo and Belmar. And they're finally going to be able to get, due to illnesses and so forth, get to have their winter concert. It's Cabrillo Valamar, but it'll be at IBL tomorrow night.
All right, great. Nate?
None other than we did meet with representatives of LSEA and CSCA.
Just the meeting last week.
Okay, and then, yes, myself and Trustee Patel had a meeting with the LCA and CSEA presidents on Monday, and again, I'm just glad to hear we want to, make sure we're moving forward in a collective manner to hire the next superintendent. And I also did happen to swing by Valamar to take a little walk around the D-wing and see what's happening back there, and I think there's a little bit of time. They're still settling in, but I think it's going fairly well, so. And that's it for me.
Great. I feel like my 2023 has been storm related. It's really nice to have the rain stopped. I would personally like to call out or recognize our M&O team. We have 2 new groundskeepers and as well as our veteran M&O team. The story around those storms is that there was no story, and that's because the day before we were cleaning out drains, we were putting in sandbags, and it's not because it happened over 2 weeks. It was re-putting out sandbags, making sure those sandbags got very, very wet and damp, and so making sure that there was plastic in there. All sorts of things happened. There was a tree that went down in front of Terra Nova High School, which meant that Ortega was without power for an hour. And so I just want to applaud all of the schools and both the principals, the school secretaries, but our maintenance and operations team, including the groundskeepers, did an excellent job of keeping us from having more damage. So we're grateful for that work.
All right, anything else?
That was it.
Okay, district goals. The district values the goals provided in our local control accountability plan and strategic plan. All of our district board agenda items are tied to these goals. 1 or more goals are listed in the description of each board agenda item.
The details for each of those district goals can be accessed on district website www.pacificasd.org. All right, so
Hand that over to Ms. Peterson.
next, Ms. Peterson with the audit report.
Thank you. Tonight, we do have Matthew Oyata from Siobhan and Associates, who will give you a brief presentation of the audit report. I do want to thank Trustee for helping us with, Needy Patel, for helping us with the audit committee and reviewing the audit report for us. So if you don't mind coming to the podium, Matthew. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Matthew. I'm with Siobhan & Associates. I'm a senior auditor. I'd like to thank you all for having me here today. I'll briefly go over the financials. It's not going to be as fun and exciting as the students, but I'll try. So just some key highlights from the financials is the net position decreased by 1.26 million to negative 6.39 million. This is mainly due to changes in long-term liabilities. General obligation bonds increased by 23 million. This is due to the new bond issuance. Net OPEB liabilities decreased by 5.6 million. Changes in pension liabilities decreased by 16.6 million. This only affects the government-wide financials. Then we'll go into a little bit into the fund financials. So all the long-term liabilities don't impact that. So this is more like short terms to the school district's financials. So total fund balance for all governmental funds increased by 19.7 million. General funds ending balance was 6.7 million. And the changes over the past 3 years to the general fund increased by 2.3 million. The school district met their general fund reserves of having it at 9%. Usually it's recommended to 3 to 4%. And then the results of our audit was we had no exceptions and no findings. We had no material weaknesses, no significant passes on adjustments, and no disagreements with management. So it was a good audit. Thank you.
All right, are there any questions regarding this item?
No, actually, I read the report and I had an opportunity to ask questions in advance, and I'll just say, great job on the audit report. I looked at some of the audit reports from other districts, and there were a lot of comments across the board, and I think you did this one really successfully, so great job.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, so do we have a motion to accept this is 2021-22, is that correct?
Yeah, it's fiscal year.
Okay, audit report, do I have any motion to approve?
A motion to approve the 2020-21 audit report?
Yeah, I think it's 21-22.
21-22.
Sorry, I was, okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, Barbara, will you take the vote?
Is all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes 5-0.
All right. Next is the approval and request for allowance of attendance due to emergency conditions. Josie.
Thank you. So this is an action item as well, and as Dr. Olson pointed out, we did well during the storms. However, we did close school for one day for safety reasons. And so Pacifica School District is highly reliant on the state funding, and so when the kids are not in school, that is a loss of what they call ADA, or a loss of funding for our district. So we would like to file this approval of a J13 request for allowance of ADA due to emergency conditions. Governor Newsom did declare a state of emergency prior to our school district closing. And what we would like the board to do is approve this tonight so that we can count that day in our calculation of average daily attendance. So there are the state forms attached to this request. And we've also, one of the things we're going to submit to the state is it's called a distance learning plan for January 5th. As one of the things they would like to see. And due to the severe weather and flooding, students were encouraged to read at home, and they did have access to all of the iReady personalized instruction in all subject matters. So that is the report tonight, and we're asking the board to approve this so we can send it to the County Office of Education Superintendent, who will bring it to her board meeting. And if that is approved by them, then they would submit it to the state for us. Any questions? Mm-hmm.
What's the process for doing more formal distance learning or virtual teaching with teachers in the case of an emergency, but you know a couple days in advance that you're likely going to close the school for safety reasons. What is the process to plan so that teachers, who are working that day are able to instruct students who are at home?
So what I will say is that our agreement with LSEA is that it says very specifically if schools are closed for more than 2 days, that LSEA and the district would meet to discuss plans for moving toward toward some kind of synchronous learning. So I think in the case of another emergency, we would want to kind of roll out synchronous learning and just say right now is that all students, like you would have emergency subplans, we also need emergency asynchronous learning plans. And that can be iReady, it can be assignments in Google Classroom, continuing the work. And I think we were unaware of the need to have a distance learning plan until we went to go fill out these forms. So just in true transparency, like our agreement doesn't allow 1 day, 2 day kinds of things. I think in the future we can negotiate that. It is not in our sunshining for this this contract, but I do think where we have some room just from now until the end of the year is making sure that the asynchronous plans are a lot tighter than they were.
Great, yeah, I appreciate that. I think this was unprecedented, what happened in California, but many unprecedented things have been happening lately, and so, teachers are now very skilled at developing these types of plans, and it would be great to see.
Yeah. And I think that what we see in other parts of the country is there's almost no such thing as a snow day anymore. Yeah. It's either in person or it's online, and we just didn't negotiate for that because we didn't realize that was going to be our future.
Yeah, I just want to recognize I was at home working, and out of all of my colleagues, I was the only one that didn't have a child on some sort of formal learning program. I mean, I should have done more as a parent, very clearly, but I think that's what was a little bit surprising.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, are there any other questions? All right, do I have a motion to approve the J13A request for allowance of attendance due to emergency conditions?
I'll make the motion to approve the J13A request.
And a second?
One second.
All right, Barbara, will you take the vote?
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes 5-0.
All right, so next, moving on to the COVID illness update, John Barkfeld.
Thank you. Good evening, Board of Trustees. I know that Trustee Villalobos requested that we do a COVID-19 update, so I'm here to present this brief update. In the presentation, you'll see the first slide is our dashboard. And I have the weeks coming back from winter break, so you can see 8 cases our first week back, 22 our second. We had to finish this presentation before this week started, but right now our number is at 4 for this week. So that's promising, moving in the direction that we want. So that's where we are currently with our COVID numbers. As far as kinds of our numbers and our trends, I think that this would be pretty obvious, but we do have a big increase in cases after breaks. We give over-the-counter tests home prior to breaks, so and our families test, and we did see this coming back from break. So you can see the numbers from Thanksgiving break, quite a big number there in that first week of December or so, and we kind of stayed pretty high after that, kind of leading up to winter break. So, but yes, we do provide the over-the-counter tests. Dr. Olson also sends a message during break reminding families to test before they come back, which is very helpful. Moving on, the next slide just describes kind of the most recent changes in guidance that have taken place. You can see November 9th, 2022, CDPH made a couple of updates. which are listed there. And San Mateo County Office of Ed later that month updated reporting guidance, mask guidance, and information about the requirements for vaccines for vaccine verification and testing of unvaccinated workers. So that was the SMCOE changes. We updated our protocols accordingly, or we updated ours in August actually, which at that point, that update was about some of the changes with quarantine time periods, which were updated then. And then lastly, our COVID supplemental sick leave for employees has expired. That expired on December 31st.
And that's a state regulation.
As far as testing and reporting, we talked about the over-the-counter tests distributed to all students and staff. Those go out to staff as well, and we get those tests from CDPH and San Mateo County Office of Ed. We talked about the messaging. As far as our reporting, we still are doing contact tracing for cases with school exposure, and we are still doing our notifications for families and staff members. This has gotten much more streamlined because we're having the notifications come from the COVID health assistants at the school sites as opposed to kind of routed through my office at the district office. So I think that the messaging is going very well this year. And we still are required to report all of our positive cases to the SPOT system, which is the San Mateo County Health Department's system for logging in positive cases. So Yolanda Pranza still continues to do that as our cases come in. She's our main contact tracer for cases as well with the district office. Obviously, the contact tracing for cases at school sites are done through the COVID health assistants. And we continue to have our strategies, our mitigation strategies. I think we're all very aware of this, and we still practice these things. This is what helps keep us safe. It's that layer of protection. So we continue to ask families and staff to be cognizant of these things. And that's the update for COVID. Happy to take any questions.
First, I want to thank you for doing this. I'm just looking back at the COVID dashboard from last January's meeting.
Okay.
And on the 10th of January, we were at 63. So it's
Right.
gone down considerably.
Yes, about a third, right?
I think that was the only question I had.
Last January of 2022 was a blur.
That was
That was like, we're trying to keep our doors open.
I was looking at it I'm just wondering, oh, here it is. Do we think that extending the Christmas break another week helped in that? Changing our Christmas break?
So we didn't change our
Yeah.
vacation,
We're
the other, so Jefferson Union High School District did. I'll be curious to look at their dashboard. What they avoided was the big stormageddon that we had on Thursday, and that allowed San Mateo County to recognize what would happen with the storm and prepare for that, so that even though the other storms were just as bad, so that's the only thing that they avoided. We can look on their dashboard to see if it helped. It's what we have next year, so if it helped, it would help us.
You would think it might help cases that started earlier in the break, but then cases that they can happen anytime during the break, so it's kind of all relative.
Yeah, it looked like Thanksgiving, from there on, it was.
Yeah, it was fine.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, John.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next to the SARC report, student accountability report card. We're Will Lucy.
Maybe you can share. That's fine. Okay, the SARC is fine. Thank you. And what I have before you is a recommendation for you to approve the school accountability report card for our Pacifica School District schools of Cabrillo, Ingram B. Lacey, Home Study and Preschool, SDC, Ocean Shore, Ortega, Sunset Ridge, and Valamar. This is a state mandated documents that need to be completed every single year. The purpose of these documents is more for the public and for the parents to get information about schools, and even for like realtors to have information about schools around areas that they're, participating in. There is one thing that I did want to point out, in that there is a lot of information that has been delayed by the state of their release that would be in the SARC that you received. Those sections include student enrollment, conditions of learning for teachers, pupil outcomes, engagement, both chronic absenteeism and school climate, and other SARC information such as class size for elementary schools, class size for secondary or IBL or RBL school, and then support staff information around that. Those are data that is loaded in by the CDE. We use a service called DocuTracking that actually gets that data firsthand from the state, and they load it in for us. But all the other information that is loaded by the district or loaded by the schools was updated or was placed in there. So I just wanted to make that note before, so that you're informed in making the recommendation. Any questions?
It is a very weird thing to present something to you that's due by the 1st, and the state isn't going to guarantee that that information is in there by the 1st. It's going to get loaded after the 1st, but yet they're not. It's a legally mandated February 1st date.
Yeah, the CDE sent out a statement to all districts encouraging the LEAs to post without the data, to post the SARCs before February 1st or by February 1st.
I had a question.
Yeah, I just was making sure. I did. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, the only thing that was really listed is all the different, actually a giant punch list at all the schools of things to prepare or repair. I guess the only thing is it in that particular item, it mentions to list the condition, but then it asks also for the planned improvement. So there's no real planned improvement. I'm just wondering what the normal steps are to kind of come back and hit that punch list. Because it's kind of a lot at all the schools.
Yeah, there is, our facilities maintenance is aware of it because they're actually received the report and it was loaded in. And I think we had I know we had a company that actually did the FIT report and did it for, many of those punch items that were listed were taken care of through the bond project updates, but there are many others that need to be addressed. And I know that facilities and maintenance are well aware of that, and they're going to get through them as quickly as possible.
Yeah, well, and it's not fair to them really, because really that's the only information that's in the document.
Yeah.
Or for the most part.
And I will say
Anyway.
this is far more detailed than this is a new company that we're using, but we never provided this level of detail in this before, so it's all in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and there are other sections that are in there that were completed or at least updated. School site information, general information, principals message, things around student achievement, actions that are being taken place. So there's some other sections, but you're right. The biggest section that is completed is the FIT report.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
sort of jumps off.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I just kind of wanted to comment on that. So. Are there any other questions?
You have my question. Okay. Just a comment, it would be great once the data is filled in, even though there's no action at the time, to put it back on the agenda so we can, great.
Any other questions? All right, do I have a motion to approve school accountability report cards for Cabrillo, Ingrid B. Lacey, Lindemar Educational Center, Ocean Shore, Ortega, Sunset Ridge, and Valamar? Do I have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve the SARC reports for IBL, Ortega, Sunset Ridge, Cabrillo, Ocean Shore, Pacifica Homeschool, and Valamar.
All right, and do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Barbara, will you take the vote?
Yes, all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes 5-0.
All right. Okay, good. California School Dashboard, okay. Cool, Little Lucy.
Excuse me. Thank you for the opportunity to share the 2022 release of the California dashboard results. So, as is the California way, we recognize that there are elements that are critical for student success in and out of school. Due to the pandemic, the last couple of dashboards was the last actually complete dashboard was in 2019. Was the 2019 dashboard. The 2022 dashboard is a fresh start and will only represent the status level of performance from 2021-2022, not progress or change, which is why you have those, I call them like little cell phone things, right? Things. So that's because it's actually focuses on the status versus change, which the previous dashboards did look at. Academic performance is one of the elements in the dashboard for both ELA and math for our 3rd through 8th grade, and it measures how well students are meeting the grade level standards. So as you can see on this slide, the English language arts, we as a school district performed at a medium level, which was 1.1 points above standard. But as you can see in our subgroup population, we had 2 of our subgroups were very low, the homeless and the students with disability, and then we had 4 student groups at low, and you can see that on the board. There's 3 groups that do not have a performance level, and that's because of the number of students that are part of that group was too low for it to actually get a group level. And for math, it's the same thing. As you notice that the homeless and the students with disability are at the very low, also in math. And again, there's no performance level for the American Indian, foster youth, and Pacific Islanders, and it's not because they don't deserve a performance level, it's because they just have there's a minimal number of students. The number of students is not over a certain number. Another element on the dashboard is the English learner progress, and the English learner progress is this is one section of the California dashboard that does measure progress or change. English learner progress measure looks at the progress that English learner students are making towards English proficiency based on the LPAC, which measures how proficient they are in English. And this is because it's based off the summative LPAC. This pertains to grades 1st through 8th, and it is specific to our English learners. And as you can see with this indicator, we have 46% of our students made progress towards English proficiency, and that chart you see there, the purple and blue are part of that 46% because of those are students that have either progressed at least one level on the ELPI, which is the English Learner Performance Indicator, or they've maintained the highest level, which is level 4, which for many students is one indicator that can get them to reclassifications. It's one of the criteria to get towards reclassifications. And because we've had this in the past, we did notice that this was based off 163 English learners. And if you did compare it to 2019 dashboard, our percentage of students making progress was at 35.3% of our students made progress. So even though this number seems to be low at 46%, there was some progress. We gained 10% more that actually were making progress from the pre-pandemic time. Chronic absency, now this one is the big one because this is a statewide, countywide, statewide issue. But the chronic absenteeism is a measurement that measures how many students are out of school for 10% of a school year, or 10% of their time during their time enrolled in Pacifica School District in 21-22. So if a student was here the entire full year, all 180 days of school, that would be 18 days that they would miss of school. And this pertains to not just 3 through 8, this pertains from TK through 8. So as you can see on this slide, we have a number of our student groups that are at very high. And you can see the list there, African American, English learners, Hispanic, homeless, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and students with disability. But all 10 of our eligible student groups were either at very high or high. Our overall rate was 20.6%, and that 20.6% is, I got the numbers here, that 20.6% is, if you wanted to kind of compare it to San Mateo County is at 21.7% chronic absenteeism, and the state of California is at 30.8% of California. So this is not just a local Pacifica issue, this is a statewide issue. Just kind of taking a little bit of more of a dive there, if we looked at our chronic absentee rate of our very high, the ones that qualified are very high, I just wanted to point out that we, of the eligible enrollment, like for instance, African American, there's 31 eligible students, 13% of them, or 41.9% were absent, absenteeism was rate. The homeless was really high at over 50%, 57%, but you're looking at a group 28 there. And then, but all of them are 30, close to 30 or above percent. The high ones were between 10 and 20%, those student groups that fell into that. And then if you want to break it down to schools, of the chronic absentee count there, these are the numbers that pertain to that. I do want to point out that independent study, they did have an attendance kind of skew there. I don't think that number is completely accurate of 42.9% or 27. I think there was an issue that was conflicting between the how we were taking attendance here for our independent study versus how the CalPADS was recording it, the attendance. So there was a little bit of an issue there. But still, if you look across the board, it's pretty much, we have some, obviously high rates of chronic absenteeism. Suspensions is another criteria, and the suspension rate measures shows that the percent of students who were suspended for at least one full school day or more, the student is only counted once in the suspension rate, even if the student was suspended multiple times or was suspended for multiple days. They're only counted as one. So we had a pretty low suspension rate, 1.2% suspended at least one day. And our one group, our African American group, that was very high, and our homeless group that was high. The raw numbers there were African American students, 4 out of 31 students were suspended in 21-22, and in homeless it was 1 out of 29 were suspended, and those were the two groups that fell into that very high or high place. So taking a look at all that, one of the accountability pieces that the state provides is that some school districts and schools were identified for targeted support. We were actually identified for differentiated assistance, which is that second tier there. And if you look at, if we look at the way you qualify for differentiated assistance is you have to be very, very low in two different areas. Student groups in two different areas would make you qualify for that. So, for instance, our students with disabilities, they qualified under pupil achievement, which was being very low in both English language arts and math, and they also qualified under pupil engagement, which was chronic absenteeism. So if you look across this chart here, the two student groups, the students with disabilities and students identified as homeless that qualified under pupil achievement, there are present actions in our LCAP that address that particular piece. One being that we are monitoring through iReady, ELA, and math diagnostics, and utilizing personalized instructions to identify those students that are performing low during the year, not waiting to the end of the year for the SBAC testing, but actually we're monitoring throughout the year to address those, and then also having time for teachers to target those students with interventions based off the analysis of that quantitative data. And then the pupil engagement, again, this is the one that was the chronic absenteeism rate. We do have teams and processes at the school site, and we also have wellness teams through the district that are monitoring and addressing based off this. The big thing this year with poor attendance is the message has been sent out that if you're sick, don't come to school, but then they're not at school, so you can be chronically absent even if it's an excused absence. So it's kind of like you're sending two messages out: go to school, but if you're sick, don't come to school, and you don't want them to come to school sick. And so that's part of the issue. But these groups, these screen teams and SST teams and wellness teams are monitoring them closely. And then the third one is the very high on suspension rate indicator. And I think this year we've done, as a school district, has done really well with this. I think that this is something that we won't be indicated on this in the future with our Caring School Community Program and our participation of our site and district leaders in the school discipline training series this fall that I think has one more session and then is going to be completed. So I think there's a lot of things that are coming out of that are going to be real helpful. And overall, again, we've done a much better job over the years of reducing the suspensions. So I mean, it's a work that still continues need to be done. So then this all connects into, because one of the first things that we do when we go through the LCAP process is to actually look at the dashboard or look at our data and conduct a kind of a needs assessment. So this chart here shows kind of the LCAP process. Those bluish lines or bluish greenish lines. What color would you call that? The arrows. Teal, thank you, teal. Those teal, like Laverne's sweater. That first process, those first three arrows are this idea of sharing data out with our educational partners and getting that information out, and then looking at actions that we have in our LCAP already and thinking about, are things that need to be changed, or things that we need to add, things that we need to take out, things we need to move, and getting input from our educational partners on that. And then the purplish, bluish lines are ones where we come up with a draft and we come back to our educational partners and we look to see, get their thoughts about this, not new, but this revised local control accountability plan. Can we move it forward? And then eventually it would come in front of you at a public hearing and then eventually be adopted. And so this is our LCAP process that goes through that, and I just kind of mentioned how we go through that. Right now, we have done the review of our dashboard and our data, and now we're just beginning. Next week, we'll be beginning a series of engagement meetings with our educational partners, and then in March and April, we'll come back and engage with them again with a draft of our local control accountability plan. And then the timeline in May and June is that we submit a draft to San Mateo County Office of Ed for them to review, and they're reviewing for compliance, they're reviewing it for differentiated assistance, all those pieces. We need to do that by May 16th, and then the public hearings on May 31st, and then the adoption would be on June 14th. I know that was a lot of information, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So I have two questions.
Yeah.
First one, is there ever going to be any plan regarding COVID and absences? Because if we're going to continue to live under these conditions, children are going to miss school if they have symptoms to try to keep everybody else well. And I feel like there has to be something to happen to prevent it from being chronic absenteeism, because we want them to stay home. we want the rest of the kids to stay healthy, so we don't want to force people back in school when they're not feeling well, but it has a negative impact on everything. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be a plan for that. And then my other question, which is separate from that, at any point where I see African American children are being suspended at a very high rate, and I know we've been working on this for years and it has come down, it's always going to make me feel a way. And my question is, in the trainings that are coming up regarding, alternative ways of dealing with issues, is bias training a part of that? Like, are we making sure that people are addressing racial bias when they're in those trainings? Because no matter what, it just keeps happening, and it's not that the African American kids are doing anything differently. So the fact that they're being suspended at a much higher rate when they're less than 5% of the population is definitely biased. So I'm wondering if that's in the training. So
let's answer that question first, and I'll defer to John about the training with Dora Dome, and then we can also talk about our training that we're doing with administrators and kind of the next 2 years of rollout. So why don't you go for that one?
I would say that the bias portion isn't necessarily incorporated with what we're doing right now. It's very, very legal and technical trainings. The pieces about suspensions, it really had to do a lot with what we talked about this at our board study, is other means of correction and keeping students in school. Thus far, it has not gotten into that bias piece. It was kind of just a more general, kind of very technical, legal training, really stressing about not suspending, keeping students in school. It also talked about the right ways to go about doing an investigation and all those types of pieces. So I would say not necessarily with this training.
I will say, so last year you did the training with Nicole Anderson. This year, all administrators, both site leaders are doing it separately from the district office, but all site leaders are being a part of this. We thought kind of the next piece was a 3-year rollout, but I think where we are, I think it's a 2 more year rollout. So next year will be principals and a leadership team, so inviting some teachers to be a part of some of that training so that principals and teacher leaders are doing it together at their site. And then the fourth year would be all teachers. It absolutely is a factor in not just suspension, but all school discipline, whether that's dress code or other pieces of that. And so if we don't address that, it will never change.
It will never change. That's my point. It's not gonna change until we address the actual issue. It's not that these students are being outrageous. It's that the people who are interacting with them are bringing their own biases and punishing them harshly just because of where they're coming from. And it just, yeah, for me, it's a trigger, you know.
Absolutely. So to address your question about chronic absenteeism, it is kind of a frustrating point that the state decided to make this their platform because we had a chronic absenteeism issue before the pandemic. Like that, I don't think ours is better or worse. I think our families are incredibly supportive and I think they keep their kids home when they're sick. I think if we can take care of all the rest of those absences, and it probably is, you know, a core set of kids that are missing a lot of school. I think this data isn't going to be that helpful to us. The same message is we don't want sick kids to come to school, so this is not going to be probably the year that we're going to be able to fix that. But we'll be working, because we're in differentiated assistance, we get to work with the county office a little bit more closely, and we'll say, what recommendations do you have? How do you say that message that very clearly says don't send your sick kids to school, but all the other days we want them at school, right? I think that's gonna be.
That had to do with this program last year. My daughter did not have COVID, but she had a fever for a week.
Yeah.
And she had it again this year. It wasn't COVID. I kept her out of school for a week. It has an impact that, you know, I can't send her to school. I'm being a responsible parent. All these parents are being responsible. They're not sending their children to school.
And so that's where I think we need to get away from shaming and blaming and just recognize, you know, there are going to be a number of things that happen to us. So in the future, we're going to miss out on funding every time kids are absent, whether that's going to be an incentive right there. Like we're going to have to very clearly get those messages, but I don't think right now is the time to do shaming and blaming. And the other part that we know in terms of, we just talked about COVID, but we didn't talk about all the other illnesses that people are getting that kept me away from work for the last board meeting and the last week and a half. So people are getting sick.
Yeah, and if you look at the data, the historical data on the chronic absenteeism, it was really isolated to almost one school. The numbers were a lot lower across the board. Even at that one particular school, there was lower, and there was a lot of actions that were improving that at that school at the time. Then the pandemic hit, and then it just blew up. That's what that's what I've seen historically with the data. If you go before 2019, yes, we had a chronic absenteeism issue, but it was improving, but then the pandemic hit and then everything got blown out of the water. Yes.
So, you know what, my complaint is going to be that we have no performance level for American Indian, foster youth, and Pacific Islander. And so, as a parent, if I'm looking at Pacifica School District and I'm American Indian and I see no performance level, how do I find that out? How do I get equal information that everybody else is getting about the race of their children, except for these few? And I know it's because there's less of a population, but I feel like we're being punished for that. As board members, you know, I wrote down some questions because for your student groups, there's no performance, but the state is giving us a ding because of how many times we've suspended African Americans. So I know that American Indians is probably in there too, maybe even foster youth, but you know what? I don't know. The information that I have in front of me, I don't know about these children. It's also a trigger for me too. Just to share with you, in another school district, I have a nephew who's 5 years old in kindergarten, longer hair than mine with the braid. And he was playing around with another kid, and it got a little, too much, and they're 5-year-olds. And the principal said, well, we could do an in-house suspension. I'm like, how can you suspend a 5-year-old who doesn't even know the rules of what is happening yet? And so when I think of, my nephew, I'm thinking, wow, he really needs an SST or a 504. But, the parent would never know that because there's no, record. There's no performance level for them. I know it's not you. I know it's a state, and sometimes I feel like writing to whoever I need to write to make this so that we know the performance of all the kids, not just the one where there's the most. I mean, we always say we're going to do equal in all, but we're not. Yeah. We are not. And so I'm just wondering, since we have the ding, they're going to be taking this particular data, right? How are we going to include American Indians, foster youth, and the Pacific Islanders in this plan?
So we can share that information. I would, if you make it a part of my evaluation, I can share it with you privately. If it's not necessarily fair to share that information publicly because it's, okay, these 6 kids, and we know 3 of them go to IBL, and here, so that people can personally identify that, and that's our objection to sharing that publicly. Because it's been a part of my evaluation, I've been able to report it out to you in terms of the progress that we've made.
Well, can we make any enhancements to this? For example, keep American Indian, foster youth, and Pacific Islanders in a group?
Yeah, what is the threshold?
Could we put them together in a group?
And then put the numbers or the graphs so that we have an idea.
So this is not adjustable to us per se, it's the state system, and they've made those pieces, and we don't have that flexibility.
But what is the number?
It might be worth our while, it's a very small number, I don't think.
It's 11, we have right now 3 foster youth, 7 American Indians, and what's the last one?
Pacific Islander.
I don't know, I can't tell you for sure what that is, but I would say it's around that amount. But again, if there was one student, like say the foster youth, the one student was chronic lapsant, then it's 33% of the foster youth are chronic lapsant. That's not the message you want to send. You want to say one of the 3, but you can't obviously say that. If it was that, I'm not saying that it's that.
No, I understand the privacy issue. Like, I understand what you're saying, like, we need to know.
Yeah,
But
well, I just think it's kind of funny how we say the accountability, but there is no accountability for these groups. And, so I just, what do we have to do?
So, I mean, Laverne, you brought this up before in previous thing, and I remember going back. I always lean on my county people. Like I always talk to them about it, and they say, well, one of the things you can do is you can go back to the county level when you have a bigger number. You're talking over districts, and you have maybe more foster youth, and you can look at the number there. I can probably find that information for the county number for American Indian or county number for foster youth. That's what their suggestion was. Like, but they were saying you cannot report out on it if it's not a significant number or it's a number that's.
I'll just have to agree to disagree.
Yeah.
But it would be nice if we could figure out a way, the county way, if it reaches over the 11.
Yeah.
I mean, I would agree that for accountability purposes, having maybe an internal board or doing it during closed session, whatever, so that it's not personally identifiable, because what we certainly don't want to do is put 2 students out in public for their performance, but accountability is still important. So I hear that. I have a couple of quick questions. One, going back to a comment that Kai made around chronically absent students, kind of building off of the comment that I made around emergency closing, I'm also wondering if, as a district, we can think about because this is the new normal. Parents are and should be keeping their kids home more than they have in the past. Hybrid learning options for students. Districts do it, and there are many different ways to do it so that it's not a ton more work for teachers to plan 2 different lessons, but it's, certain periods of time. There's like a webcam, I don't know, there's something in a classroom where a student can listen into a mini lesson or participate in some way. I do think having pieces like that built in can support students who are at home have at least some connection with what happened during the day. So I would love to hear more about how we might be able to integrate hybrid learning options in those environments. And then my other question is, if you go to page 6, I just wanted to understand the data. So this is less like a statement. So on the mathematics page, and I'm using it as an example just to better understand the data. So on the left side, is that all students, not an aggregate of the student groups that are listed here, but actually all students in the district? Is that
All students, you're talking about the 6.4% below standard?
the first box? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, outside of the equity report part, but
Yeah, that's
all students.
That's all.
And then
Took the assessment.
who took these?
3rd through 8th grade.
Got it.
And took it last year, so
Yeah.
now 4th through 9th.
Totally got that from that previous chart. So then when it says 6.4 points below standard, what is the standard? And the reason why I ask that is when you look at just the percentage that met, exceeded, met, what have you, it kind of tells a different story than 6.4 points below standard. And so I'm trying to rationalize this. Like from the percentages of exceeded, met, which I follow very closely, guys, we've made improvements in math, not as much as, we should or we need to, but we've made improvements. But then this makes it look like we're lower.
So standard is the lowest part of that standard met. So if you're looking at like.
So the 4
there's
things.
There's a scale scores, right? So there's a scale at, number 325 and up or something like, I don't want to say what the number is, but there's a standard per grade level. So you look at that standard per grade level, right? And so then it's the looking at the ones that are above it and the ones that are below it and doing the difference between the two. We fall at the 6.4 below that standard, so 6.4 points below that standard.
Interesting. Do you know if that's an improvement from last year?
Yes.
It is, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, last year, we have to think 70% of our students took it.
Right.
So, I don't know, they are very careful to say compare this to previous years because that's why they're just doing status, like a fresh start, we're gonna start now.
Yeah, I see. Okay, thank you,
Yeah.
that's it. No comments, just questions.
My question is, with Needy's following up with that, is if we did, in the foreseeable future, have like lesson plans when the kids are home with a fever or maybe they're, not feeling 100%, would we still be counted for that child if they were listening in on a class?
It's still an absence.
It's still an absence.
That needs to change, that's a state thing.
What's that?
That's a state issue, it has to come from the state, because at some point they're gonna have to change it.
Yeah, I think so, and the point is, what happens when you miss school completely? I mean, it's a very complex thing. I love Needy's thinking, and I think we need to keep pushing that on that end. There's a lot of steps that would have to have that happen even just here, or those days to get counted. I think we have to be, what are the parts that we can do? Is there a way that we can have a district teacher that may be able to connect with kids, but then they're not connected to their classroom? And so there are a lot of steps. It's not an easy fix, but I think that conversation has to keep happening.
And I think we can look at our peer districts who have implemented hybrid learning options for their students who are ill and out of the classroom, because there are examples like within 20 miles of us that we can look at.
Yeah, I'm not saying we can't, I'm just saying for us, it's a big lift so let's keep talking about it.
But also too, is I would really highlight the chronic absenteeism. If we didn't have any groups in chronic absenteeism, we wouldn't be in differentiated assistance at all, because we wouldn't have had 2 groups for our groups at all. And that's consistent with the other 14 districts in Canandaigua County that are in differentiated assistance. So, I mean, there was 4 or 5 last year, now there's 14. So it's, the chronic absenteeism is a big piece of it. So they gotta do something about that.
That was just for information.
Okay. So I'm thinking because of the time, and we have special guests here, that we should maybe take a 5-minute break, come back at 8:20, and then start with the rest. We'll start at item F, and then move into our presentation from the Nicole Anderson and friends. Does that sound good?
Sound okay?
All right.
Okay,
So 5-minute break.
Nicole, I'm just texting her right now, so.
She's on standby.
Okay.
Come on.
Testing, testing. Linda, you can hear me? I see you waving. Is that Laverne? I can see you all. Can you hear me okay? Perfect, perfect. Good to see you all. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I just
So one thing we have to do before we move on to this next step is to have the superintendent employment and the acceptance of the superintendent's resignation as of June 20th, 2023. At a special board meeting on January 11th, 2023, Dr. Olson submitted her letter of resignation as of June 30th, 2023. The board will vote on acceptance of a resignation. Are there any questions on this item?
Can we change your mind? I just want to know what my options are.
I want to know what all the options are on, so without saying much, because we're on a timeline, but it has been my honor to be the superintendent of this district, and who would have guessed all the things that we would go through, but I am incredibly grateful for the support of this team as well as the team of administrators that I've worked with and all of the employees and families of the Pacifica School District. It has truly been my honor, and I thank you for your support.
Well, thank you. And I think we'll probably have opportunity for a lot more discussion later. But let's go ahead and do we have an approval, or excuse me, do we have a motion to accept the resignation of Superintendent Heather Olson?
I'll make a motion to accept her resignation.
And do I have a second?
Second.
All right. And Barbara, will you take the vote?
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
All right.
I know.
Well,
I took you.
Here we are.
What do you want to say?
Okay.
What happened?
So let's move on. So I'd like to. So we're going to move on now, I guess, to our superintendent search. We've got Nicole Anderson and McPherson and Jacobson online, as well as
Daniel Moreo.
Daniel Moreo is here in person. So I will turn it over to you.
Nicole was on the screen there a few moments ago, but in keeping with your earlier conversation about being virtual, a hybrid of sorts, we're doing that tonight. You know, we got one of me live and the other on camera, and I know Nicole will be here quickly.
There we go.
I'm here.
And I'd like to say, before, as we get started, my congratulations to you as I listened to your report, your audit report. As a former superintendent, that's the type of report you want to hear. So my congratulations to you and the staff for having gotten such high marks. Good for you. And I'll turn it over to Nicole at this point, although she keeps vanishing on me.
She's there.
I am here. Can you see me or hear me okay?
No, we can't see you, and we want to see you. We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Uh-oh, I can hear you fine, and I'm not sure if it's, if you have to do the highlight, I'm not positive how that works, but,
Yeah.
you can hear me okay. it
Yeah,
sounds good.
we're back. It's just, well, we're seeing you. Well,
She drops in and out.
Not
Okay.
sure what's going on, but at any point, let me know if it cuts off, at any point, and I'm really thankful for my partner in crime, Dr. Dan Moreo, who's, gonna be partnering with us to support you, in this next, step on the journey with the board, so just really appreciate, connecting with you virtually. I wish I could be there in person, but I want to echo what Dr. Dan said is, Superintendent Olson, bittersweet moment, right? We've had the opportunity to work with you and your board for the last few years through the San Mateo, School Board Association process with their Equity Network, and also Deborah Keys Wright. She also wishes you all well. We actually are with another board tonight, which is why I couldn't be there in person. But just really, I'm thankful for the opportunity to potentially help you facilitate this really important process as a board. You all know that this is the most important decision you make. You have a couple of responsibilities, obviously, policy and making sure your district is fiscally sound, but that other really important one is your only employee, right? You have to hire. And so Superintendent Olson, sounds like you're leaving some big shoes to fill based on what I've heard. And some people say, hey, stay a little longer, but we're thankful that we have some transition time, right? And really appreciate you sharing it, fairly early, so the board has an opportunity to go through a process to really look at who would be that next superintendent. And so, again, I'm Nicole, and Dr. Dan, we're going to actually spend a little bit of time just sharing kind of an overview of the process. I want to give you a chance to ask questions. And then tonight, if possible, we'd like to cover a few things in terms of some outcomes tonight, and really make sure that we're ready for those next steps. And so there's some visuals. You should have a packet with you that has some information, including a calendar, some brochure examples, some advertising kind of costs, things of that nature. So we'll go through each one. Any questions you have, we will be more than happy to share. Just for the sake of the board, I know sometimes we're visual learners as well. Do you all prefer us using the slides that I shared, or can we just jump right in? Sometimes people like visuals, but you have everything in front of you, I think. So typically we use a presentation with slides. I don't want to do that unless you all really prefer that. So let us know.
I'm okay.
I think we're okay.
Let's do it. All right. So what I'll do. Yes.
And then to the people that are watching on Zoom or Pacifica Coast TV, the items that Nicole was referring to are attached to the agenda. And then at the end of this, we do have one public comment on this at the end of your presentation.
Absolutely. Thank you. Can you hear me? Is that a little better? Volume better? Perfect. Okay. All right, so a couple things I want to do tonight is one is really establish kind of some protocols moving forward. And so one of the things we want to do tonight is ensure that we have a good understanding of who our point of contact will be. And so as we kind of end the presentation, let's make sure we have that clarity so that we, as we communicate back and forth, that we can have an opportunity to know exactly who we're going to be sending information to. I know Barbara has been amazing at, I call it herding the cats. So not sure if that's going to be our point of contact, which is very common for most boards, and kind of leaving Superintendent Olson to continue to run the district and not have to be too burdened with this. But you all please let us know as we finish this process tonight. We do want to make sure we know who's our point of contact. I think that's really important to recognize. But first, really want to get a chance to kind of let you know what we're going to do tonight. So one is we're going to go through the calendar, okay? And one thing is to help you understand, like, what is the timeline for this? We have a few questions for you that we'll want to know, what is your kind of result and goal in terms of hiring your new superintendent. And we actually did create a draft calendar just based on what typically would happen at this time of the year. And then we do want to run some dates through the board. So this may take a moment when we're talking about the calendar. So I always want to warn the community that sometimes this part of the board meetings often seems a little bit tedious, but it is important that we have a calendar so that as we think about advertising the position, that people actually know what the timeline is, and we can be really clear about that. And so speaking of advertising, we do want to also talk about advertising.
We're going to want to talk about getting some input from your stakeholders. I think that's super important. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to set some criteria, like what's the job description, right? What is it that you're going to be expecting from your next superintendent as we look at matching the next superintendent to the criteria that you all are envisioning. So one way to see this is the big picture. I think, Dr. Dan, they all have the copy of the proposal in hand. I'm holding it up and you probably can't even see it, but the proposal. And I just want to have you look at page 7. Page 7 helps you kind of understand the phases. So we actually go through 5 phases that we actually spend time walking the board through. Dr. Dan and I've kind of lost track at this point how many searches we've done, but this process has been really, I think, effective in the phases of work. There's a lot of transparency that I think this process provides to have input from stakeholders, to give the board a real structure. So as you're looking at these phases, we're going to go through them pretty quickly, but I do want to make sure you ask questions along the way as we go through this particular process. In this particular proposal, obviously you see the investment, and so that is part of what's illustrated in the contract that we provided. And so in that, we will talk about advertising costs, you name it, but I want to make sure that you all have a real clear idea also about what the cost is for the particular services, and that's actually illustrated on page 25, just so you have that in front of you. And so you'll notice that the fee in itself is $13,000 for all phases of the work, but the not to exceed is $17,500. And I want to make sure we're clear on why that is the case, because there are some expenses associated with doing the search. The good news is that Dr. Dan and I are local, so a lot of our expenses, we're not going to be on flights. We're not going to typically have a hotel room. There's some printing costs and mailing costs, things like that come into play, but ultimately you can know as a board that your budget will never go beyond what it says not to exceed amount. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that. And if there's any questions, we just want to make sure we give you an opportunity to ask that. So I'll just pause for a second. Any questions on that piece as you get to see what the proposal consists of, but then that is the actual investment that we've proposed to you. So any questions on that? Okay.
Look like they're good to go, Nicole.
Okay, awesome. All right. So let's jump right in. I'm going to go back to page 7, if that's okay. And just talking about the phases of work. So one of the things we're in phase 1, obviously, and one of the things we want to do is really hit on, I mentioned earlier, establishing the characteristics of your next superintendent. We call it criteria. We do need to establish the timeline, and we want to make sure we have some advertisement direction from you. Where do you want this to be placed in advertising? This is really important to understand, because as we go from this phase, we jump right into actually holding stakeholder input meetings. So we want to hear from your stakeholders. This is what actually helps us with not only our recruitment and our advertising, but it also gives like a sense of people who may want to be your superintendent, have a good understanding of what the stakeholders want to see. We'll talk a little bit about that process in a moment. Phase 3 is more about like us going through as consultants. Once the applications are out there, we actually do some evaluation and a little bit of screening, right? Paper screening, vetting, a lot of reference checks. And then we get to a place we're working with you as a board on developing those interview protocol and procedures. And that's really important for phase 3. Phase 4 is actually where you get into the work, right? You're going to select your applicants. So we'll give you an opportunity to see all the applicants. We'll give you a process around how you're going to interview. You will actually have a chance potentially to include your stakeholders in being a part of what we call the interview panel process. That is something the board needs to decide. Some call it an open process, where you actually have stakeholders who have an opportunity to be engaged in the process. They don't actually select the superintendent, but they do give input on strengths and areas of growth that they see from the candidates who are interviewed. So that's something you all need to think about in terms of the process. We have had, I think, Dr. Dan, a really great experience with that. Some boards decide to have a closed process and not include stakeholders in the interview process, but this is something the board really needs to consider. And it actually is a really great way to allow the new superintendent to be introduced, right, to the stakeholders ahead of their first day, but what what they felt about the candidates that were interviewed. So that's something we can talk about. Of course, you'll select your new superintendent, and from that point, we do stick around for what we call a phase 5, which is where we actually establish some performance objectives. When you get to do the superintendent evaluation, you have goals and objectives. We can actually support you with that. And we do have a guarantee. And the great part about the guarantee is that for any reason in the next 2 years after you've hired the superintendent that for whatever reason it doesn't work, then what we would do is come back and conduct the search again for you at no cost, with the exception of the expenses, right, that go with that. And so I want to pause for a second, Dr. D, in terms of just the phases. Anything you want to add to that before we kind of go through each piece, in particular phase 1 with them?
Well, I was just going to highlight the importance of the stakeholder meetings, and I have found that the candidates, people who are interested in applying, once that document becomes public, really rely on that for a lot of background information, because it's really face-to-face conversations. And then also want to comment on the guarantee piece. People sometimes get nervous as so what's going to happen. Well, what we've had is superintendents who get hired, but then suddenly something happens personally and they need to leave. And so for the first 2 years, we're still here and we'll help you go through the process to select somebody else. Hopefully it doesn't happen. One of the things about McPherson and Jacobson is we have one of the highest track records of retaining superintendents in school districts. And that's what you want, because too many turnovers is not good for for our students' performance ultimately.
Yeah, great point. Great point.
I just have one question, and I have a lot of confidence that you guys were gonna get awesome candidates from the get-go. But what happens if we get to the end of phase 4 and we're just not quite feeling like we found the right match for us? What would happen at that point?
Do you want to field that one, Nicole? I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Dr. D, and I'll just chime in. Go ahead.
If we get to that point, number one, there is going to be so many opportunities. We even have the finalists who will be interviewed, or what we call the top 10 that we present. They will actually do a video, so you will visually see them prior to even interview them. We have not had a situation such as that, but if we should, that means we're going to extend the timeline, and we can go on. We need to do more of a search. Again, we have not had that because there's been so many opportunities.
Right.
We need to look at the paperwork, and as I said, we have them do a recording, and you've got some questions that they respond to. So even before they walk in the room for an interview, you've already got a sense of who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and just adding that criteria, I think you're going to do this tonight. We'd like you to do this tonight, is help us get started with what is that we call it 5 criteria, kind of the job description. And we have a criteria-based process. So everything you do from start to finish is based on that 5 criteria, down to your interview questions, down to how we actually recruit, right, and create that match. That's super important to drive this work, down to even looking at how we ask questions to your stakeholders. What do they want to see in the new superintendent? Like, those things help us match who might be the best fit. So when you get to the end, you will have a lot of information, as Dr. Dan said. And also remember, this is something where when you make this decision, you're going to have a hard decision, because there will be multiple people that you'll have to select from to get to that place. That has been our experience with all of our searches, that the board, our job is to make it really hard for you, because you can only pick one. That's actually going to be your experience. But if, as Dr. D says, you get to the end and you're like, we're just not sure, we always say, like, you never want to settle, but you do want to think about trusting the process, and the process really usually leads you to the best fit based on what you envision tonight, which is your 5 criteria. And so that really makes a difference in everything you do, down to the end. If, let's say, you have 2 people and they're just like photo finish, right? What we often do is walk you through a process where you have a decision-making process, and it always goes back to the criteria, right? Always. And so this is something you all will have an opportunity after tonight to look at. How do we want to finalize our criteria so that can really drive the process? So I'm really confident you'll have a hard time. So.
Highlight that last point. The most difficult part we typically run into is that final, the night after you've interviewed everybody, got all the information, and you've got a couple of candidates. It's like, how can we blend it? Can we hire both of them? How do we blend them? That's you. Work you through. So you get one
It's gonna get more now. Absolutely. So let's do this. Let's kind of give you a picture of what it looks like. And the easiest way to do that, honestly, is to go through the calendar. And then what we can do is walk you through, like, literally, what does that look like? So let's do that first. And then feel free to just have me pause, and we can chime in to give a little bit of details on these. And then we will pause and ask some questions of you. And so the calendar, it is a proposed calendar. And so the dates here are not set in stone. Obviously, there we have to make adjustments based on board meetings you have, or if someone's out of town, you may have a spring break, things like that, that might interfere with this calendar. So this is proposed, and we will want to hear from you tonight, like what may work better for you. But based on the timeline, it's backwards mapping from starting July 1st. That is typically the start date for the new superintendent, is July 1st. And is that still correct? I think Superintendent Olson, your last day is June 30th. Is that correct? Yeah. So what we did is backwards mapped, so that you could have some transition time as well. So whether you have internal or external candidates, whoever is your finalist will have some transition time. So just want to give you a little sense of that, so that you have a really a good smooth transition. And so I'm going to start at the beginning though. So obviously this past week, we've had a chance to just at least prepare for this meeting. So you'll see again that you all gotten the proposal, the contract. We'll need to finalize that as you make your decision tonight. Obviously you have to approve the contract, but also having that point of contact. So just pausing for a moment. Do you have a sense of who's going to be the main person that we would be in communication with? Even though we can check in with any of you at any time, and you can always reach out to either of us during the search process, but we usually have one person so that it's really easy to streamline the communication. And so do you all have an idea of who that would officially be?
President? Yeah. Barbara. I think Barbara.
What?
Yeah.
Barbara's officially it. All right, Barbara, congratulations. We're going to bug you even more now. But yeah, but so I do want to say, Barbara, like that, the one great thing about us working with you is our job is to really conduct the search and facilitate. We do need you to help us connect some dots, but at any point, if it's something that we're not sure about, or if you're like, hey, this is really a lot, like, we partner with you so that you're not adding an entire new project, which is, it's a temporary one, of course, it'll end, but there are some things we will need from you that we can't do, but the majority of this, we really have the process. And so we want to make it as easy as possible, knowing that you still have to support your current superintendent and all the business of the district. So just want to reassure you of that. And at any point, we can check in. Usually we check in about once a week just to make sure you have what you need. We go back and forth email. And so we'll definitely be your thought partner on this, but depend on you as well to make this happen. So I hope you're okay with the direction from the board. Excellent.
A folder for you that's actually the point of contact folder.
Yeah, perfect.
I gave it to her so she could kind of follow along during this meeting, but
perfect.
Information in there for you.
Excellent. And so what we'll do, Barbara, is follow up after this meeting with some of the documents we may need, but would again make it as seamless as possible. So one of the things that I do want you all to think about is, again, tonight we want to make sure we finalize this calendar, and then we also are going to want to have some form of stakeholder input. And so that's where Barbara will probably spend the most time going back and forth, is creating a schedule where we can have input from our stakeholders. So when we get to that part of the calendar, we'll pause and we'll talk a little bit about that. So obviously tonight, you can see that today's the 18th. You can see that's here. And so what I want to do is spend a little time talking about as we kind of go through this particular process, we're going to need to determine some criteria. And so when we talk about the criteria in itself, we're going to actually spend a moment asking you, like, what are the top criteria or like expectations, desires you want in your new superintendent? So I know Dr. Dan's in person, so this would be helpful for him to kind of capture this as well. And what we'll do is we're actually going to spend a moment doing that kind of separately from this calendar, but I just want to share that's what we're doing tonight. We're also going to need to go through advertising. So once you've set the criteria, we have a brochure. You all should have some samples that you got in your folders. And I think I shared those. Go ahead.
When I was looking through the packets, I only got the flyers there. I don't see them.
Yeah.
They're on the website.
The hard copy. Yeah. I'm sorry. The electronic. Yeah. And Dr. D, if you have some in your hand, feel free to share with them just to see visually. So one of the things we want to do is actually have a document we can share in person with people or electronically. So those are examples of some searches we've already done, just so you get a sense of the information we get from you is going to show up in a brochure that we actually would share with our recruits, if that makes sense. And so that same information will also be on our Mac and J website, which we get thousands of hits every day on those. We also have several other venues that aspiring superintendents are well aware of. So you have EdCal, for example, which is in print. That's our AXA kind of newsletter. And that they actually have an online and a print version. We have of course, the Ed Join, which is very much where a lot of the jobs around California can be found. We actually, again, I mentioned the brochure, but also there's some other venues that may come up as well. And so I think you all have a copy of some other options. You all see that in front of you with regards to our networks of CALSA and CASA and ALAS and lots of our national organizations, NABC, I think, is it ASCD? Am I saying it right? Or AASA? We got plenty of lots of acronyms, but we have many platforms where you can choose to advertise and you can see the costs associated with them, so that you can determine like where do we really want to spend our time and energy. On the calendar, I only mentioned 4 because those are typically the ones. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Okay.
The cost of the additional advertising.
Yeah. You say it again.
The cost of the additional advertising, where might we find that?
Okay, so do you see that in your folder?
We don't know where to look.
There's a should be a sheet that says.
It's a 1-pager.
Okay, got it.
You see it? Okay.
The 1-pager.
Still looking.
Yeah. And so that document, I mean, I don't want y'all to spend a lot of time on it, but it's just to give you a reference of the typical cost. Every year it goes up a little bit. And
Pass mine or copy around.
We can make copies.
yeah, okay. Okay.
And when we get that copy, actually, technically, I'm going to ask you to scan it and give it to Barbara because it should be uploaded onto the web.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it sounds like that one wasn't attached to the agenda items I sent. Did you not have that one attached?
Did not see that, no.
Okay, apologies if that wasn't on there. But it is important for y'all to see that. And the big picture is any additional advertisement outside of what I shared. Typically, and Dr. D, help me out because I think, it varies from district to district, but I would say no more than about maybe $1,300, would you say? Typically, when we look at the advertisement costs, so the brochure, EdCal, EdJoin, typically altogether about $1,300 for about a month and a half of advertising, would you say?
Yes, that's been the ballpark that I've worked with.
Yeah. So very, very normal process, a great investment. It's not a bad thing, but I think you want to get it out to as many people as possible. And the great part about having Dr. Deanna and myself is we also have many other consultants as part of the Mac and J team who have a broad network. And so a lot of that network is where we actually have, I would say, the natural advertising built into our consultant network. And so even though there are other search firms who also do superintendent searches, we have pretty good relationships with many of those consultants. And so we actually all many times collaborate. And so there's a really broad network when I say the advertisement goes beyond what you see on the advertising sheet. So
Jacobson also has former schools, actually current and former school board members who are also part of the team.
Yeah.
So we've got that network as well.
Absolutely. So any thoughts about advertisement in terms of your preferences? I think the no-brainers are EdCal. Would you all say yes to that? The print and maybe the online?
Yep.
I see Heather shaking. I can see you, Heather, mostly shaking your head. Okay, does that sound okay?
That's where people look, right?
Tell them, Heather. They typically go to the back of the EdCal and that's where they start reading, right? Where all the jobs are. That's kind of a culture in AXA, right? It's kind of an ongoing joke. Yep. Yep. EdJoin as well. So y'all good with EdJoin?
We have a question.
Jump in.
So outside of these particular advertising venues, I'm also just curious how you advertise or gather candidates from maybe non-traditional backgrounds.
Ooh, good question. Yeah, I would say the majority of our candidates have usually been educators, right, that have gone through like that pipeline from teacher to administrator, site level to district level, right? That's the majority of people, but we have had several superintendents who have been placed who actually were non-traditional, some who have been consultants, who've maybe come from the CBO space, right, have come from an HR space, and some have been counselors in the past and not a teacher, if that makes sense. Rarely you have some who have come from a whole different career field, right? But typically what we're going to do tonight is you all have to decide what you want that to look like. And that will actually determine who applies for your job. And so often like boards will say things like, hey, we want someone with teaching experience, right? We want someone who's had site level leadership, executive cabinet leadership. Those are things that are very typical. So the non-traditional, we often say, don't put people in a box, right? Because you may miss some really great candidates. You actually have a superintendent in your county. We did a search in San Carlos. And San Carlos, I would say that, yes, an educator, but sometimes a non-traditional space. If you listen to her story and her journey, and you actually have a superintendent who is there now, who actually has really proven that she met the criteria. If that makes sense. We've had a couple of, again, have been like a CBO or someone who's been a counselor, right? Who has gone a different route. So I think you just have to ensure that your criteria is clear, and then that way you can have the best fit and the best match. So we definitely
more pointed towards advertising vehicles. So I understand that we align on the criteria if that was an area, but so far the advertising routes are very traditional, I guess, is what I'm seeing. So how do you look at other?
And earlier when Nicole talked about the different associations we belong to.
Yeah.
Small school districts is a venue. Personally, I'm a member of the National Superintendent's Roundtable. That's another venue. So we use those sort of things to advertise. The search I just completed, I literally went to the president of one of those associations and said, look, I'm looking for a superintendent for this district. Who's in your membership that you would think I should reach out to?
Yeah.
That sort of.
So the network.
The networks and what have you. But we do advertise with the other associations that aren't listed here.
Yeah, good point. And it's a great question. I think that this is the educational space, so most of our networks are focused on education, but non-traditional, definitely if you have areas where you want us to advertise and focus on, also let us know. I think it's important we hear your direction and your vision as well. And your criteria really will help drive that as well. So great question. Great question. So my last kind of question around advertising was EdJoin. So that is another one that's very traditional, very ideal. We were thinking 60 days is an opportunity around that time frame to do your advertising on EdJoin. So is that one that you all would be willing to include in your advertising platforms?
They now have the price sheet, Nicole.
Thank you.
So again, the two I want to draw your attention to is EdCal, the print and the online, as well as EdJoin. Those are the two major ones that we utilize and highly recommend. You can see the costs associated with those two.
And in general, do you find that most of the candidates come from one or more of these like EdJoin feels like a common one that I hear our HR talk about
That's probably the
so
most popular.
if it's like 90% come through EdJoin as an example, do you have any stats on previous searches?
I don't have
I think it varies. Yeah, Dr. D, I don't know if you have a specific stat. I think it really varies. There's word of mouth. There's the McPherson site, which we get, I said, over 1,000 hits like in a day. We have, and by the way, we are a national search firm. So what that means is you'll have folks who are interested from other states. So that is something also that will happen. We do also recruit. So I think you have to remember there's a lot of different spaces why people like apply is we actually recruit them too. So I think it really varies from search to search. But EdJoin, yes, almost everyone sees that. And EdCal, especially California administrators who are part of AXA as a member, they all pretty much see it in that space.
I would say EdJoin's probably the most popular. And anybody from out of state wants in and they start asking, where do I look? Directed to EdJoin right away. So it tends to be the most popular.
Just out of curiosity, I see EdCal has print and online ads. People are still using print. Is it still viable? I'm just curious. I'm just wondering, like, is it really worth the $280 print ad for 1 week?
It's a great question.
Yes.
Well, and yes, they do still have, EdCal comes out of AXA. We get a weekly newspaper, and as somebody mentioned, it's the only magazine or periodical that people read from the back to the front. Are the listings of jobs in California. So
It
we
does
get
seem
that.
a little odd, but I don't know how to look for the jobs on the online version. I mean, obviously, somebody who's looking for a job would do that. It is that piece where I think it's, and if you had to choose one or the other, I'd absolutely pick EdCal.
But both EdCal, it's just they separate their print from their online.
Yes.
We would miss an opportunity if we didn't do the print.
It could be the industry. That's why I just asked the question, because every industry.
Good question. Yeah.
It's to see a print ad.
It's what gets people talking. So it's like, okay, I'm looking for a job, and my friend knows I'm looking for a job. Oh, look, they just saw this in the print version while they were eating.
Right.
And that's how that gets.
Yeah. And I'll give you a good example. It is a culture. I think Superintendent Olson, you'll probably agree. There's a culture around getting that newsletter. Obviously, there's other articles, things of that nature. But there is, like, for example, a superintendent symposium coming up for AXA, right? And that is a space where those conversations happen. Based on today, that probably won't show up in the print, but there is the ability to get the online presence pretty quickly. When you may not have all your criteria finalized, you may not have everything in place, but you can really like get a hold of the spaces where you have a collective audience of superintendents and aspiring superintendents in different platforms, different conferences. And so having the online and the print is helpful. Similar to having the brochure, right? We send that brochure electronically to more maybe than we actually do in print. But having it is really helpful in our recruitment process, and it is a culture in AXA. So just kind of needing from you all, do y'all feel comfortable with at least those two platforms where there's a charge around EdCal, print and online, and then also EdJoin? Do y'all feel comfortable with those? Those are costs associated with them.
One thing to think about that I follow on Twitter that gets a lot of press is CALSA, California Association of School.
Latin American School Administrators.
Right.
Yes.
They have great credibility and online presence, and I think putting it out there would be helpful in that.
I also wonder, I see a lot of like charter school networks putting their leadership postings on a more like private sector background, like LinkedIn. And I don't know what the cost is. I don't think it's very high, but I'd love to consider a platform like that in order to broaden the pool.
You all do that already.
Oh, it says it's included in the fee, actually.
Oh, great. Nevertheless.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and then we can target different organizations, I think, is what is helpful. So CASA, there's also, I think I'm saying it wrong, Capia,
Yeah.
CAPL, we have a lot of affinity groups for people of color in particular who have associations, so administrators of color. Those have actually been really helpful to target them. We often talk about bringing diverse candidates to you in terms of not just ethnicity, but also any form of cultural identity, gender, you name it. And so I think it's important that you do also target those affinity groups as well. And whether they have a platform that charges or not, I think those are spaces that we actually should reach out to. And we actually include in our recruiting. So that's the great piece about that. But the main thing is just knowing, because there is a budget associated with this, we want to make sure that you all give us some direction on advertising. So I'm hearing, and Dr. D, maybe you hearing them as well. So I'm hearing EdCal, both online print. I hear EdJoin as well. I hear CALSA. Any other ones that you've identified that have a cost associated with them?
And know again that both Nicole and I, we tend to be everywhere almost. And like next week is the superintendent symposium, and I will be in attendance in that, and I will be talking about your district and saying, yeah, you may want to check us out. Look, in a couple of weeks, everything will be out there. But that's the sort of networking. And there are sororities and fraternities that, as people graduate, that continue to stay together. We reach out to those, and that's where we really find many more of our diverse applicants, is through those sort of associations.
So any other ones that came up that I may have missed that have a cost, just so we can make sure we know kind of the budget that you all are okay with? So I heard CALSA, anything else?
I think so. What about putting it on our website? I noticed that you're gonna put it on your website. Is it
Yes.
for us to put it on our own website?
Absolutely. We actually encourage you to have like a tab around superintendent search. So anything that happens during the process, that it goes there. It's really easy for people to find. And people will be researching your district, right? Doing their homework. So I think it's really important also to have it on your website as well. So we'll give you some language you can add, some hyperlinks, things like that. But absolutely. Absolutely.
We encourage you on your landing page to make it so they can land there. Maybe a link that they have to hit, but superintendent search, updates, all that sort of thing, so they can get the information.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it worth considering, because the EdJoin, EdCal ones are California only, and I assume so is that CALSA that you mentioned? Is it worth considering one that has a national reach?
You have a few there. I think you have NAPSI and ALAS, and I think it's AASA. There's a couple on there that are national. So if you want us to reach out to them and also add it to that, absolutely. McPherson gets its own like hits nationally. That's the great news about it. So if you didn't specifically pick those, you still have a very clear national presence, because we are a national search firm. So while we're California consultants and most of our recruiting typically sits in California, you have the national presence through the McPherson site.
AASA would be the National Superintendents Association.
Yep.
If you want
That's not bad.
National Superintendents Group, that would be.
That's a good one. Yep.
Is that limiting our pool to sitting superintendents though?
No, because I think if you're looking for a superintendent job, let me think about it.
Well, you can access, for AASA, you can access their job postings, what have you. So even if you're not a member, you can get into that.
I mean, I think it's aspiring, but in California, people are AXA members, they're EdJoin. I think that would be really going outside. But again, there are going to be people that are looking from other states that would be looking at EdCal.
Yeah.
You know, that you want to move to California, right?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And so again, if you all like decide after this meeting that you may want to explore another platform, we can add that to it. We just want to make sure you're clear about here's the advertising cost. So we want to get your, your direction on that so that we can move forward once we have everything solidified around your criteria and the timeline. So if something comes up later and you're like, hey, we want to add this, you are welcome to do so.
And what's a good application rate for a district our size in terms of application? Not the following process, but through advertising.
Yeah.
I just finished one up, well, it was last spring, I guess, and I was also involved in yet another search. And both of those cases, there were smaller school districts. And in talking with folks, they said, if you can get 10 applicants, you've done well. In both of our cases, we exceeded 30, almost 40 applicants that we got based on the recruiting.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is hiring season, if you want to call it that, because you have, folks like Superintendent Olson who are announcing and kind of preparing for that transition. So this is about that time when you look at the time frame. So I think there is more opportunities for people to be ready to go and engage in this process, if that makes sense, starting with the July 1st start date. So I think you will have quite a number. I think every search I've done, it's been at least 30. I mean, I don't think I've had less than that. We had one search that was over 50 applicants. So I think it's really about not only advertising, but also what we call the attractiveness of your district. So there's some things we'll talk about, including like your compensation package, right? Like that criteria. One thing that was really powerful in drawing people was calling out like being an equity leader. So that was a criteria that districts that we've worked with, and we've had the honor of working with you and focus on that as well. So that actually is why some said, hey, we saw that. That is really why we wanted to really reach out and become their new superintendent. So I think it's really the attractiveness of your district, which also increases the number of people who want to be your superintendent. But also there are a select few who do apply for a lot of the jobs we have, and they may not be qualified, but they often do apply for the jobs. And so a lot of times with our sorting out of who is like, we go through our paper screening, who's a good match for you. Typically, there could be a third of the folks in there that just don't qualify for the position. And so it's more about us really sorting out who matches the criteria, do the reference checks. And then for you all, we'll get to the space of probably recommending between 8 to 10 that you all get to now really sort and narrow down who you want to interview. But you will have, I think, a great pool of people. I will say this, and Dr. D, I've kind of lost track, but there are some openings. There's more openings than normal for a couple of reasons. You have a lot of retirements that are going to be happening the next couple of years. You have also the impact, I would say, of COVID for folks who have gone through a lot the last couple of years and just kind of at that space where they're ready for that transition. You have a variety of things. There's an election season that I would say politically has impacted the climate of superintendency. So there's a lot of people who may be interested, but also you may have some, openings. There's going to be more openings, I think, than the normal. So these are why we want to really be clear about the criteria so that you really get the right match. Because what we don't want to do is have just this open season, everyone's applying and there's no real sense of what you all really want. So that's part of our job. So I don't want you to stress too much about that, but that's our role, is to really make sure that we sort down to who matches, who's the best fit for you. So hopefully that helps a little bit. All right, so I want to kind of get you moving through the rest of the process, because I know you're all going to get tired, and I want to make sure I can still have your best thinking this late at night. So what I want to do is just make sure I can confirm for now that we have EdCal, we have EdJoin, we have both print online. We have CALSA, AASA, and if there's any others we want to add in, feel free to let us know on the journey. But I think we have a good sense of what you would want. Does that sound like a plan?
Thank you.
Okay, I see a thumbs up. All right. So let's do this. Let's keep moving through. So just kind of thinking about, okay, you have an advertising space. Now, what do we advertise? And then when do we advertise? So one of the things that you may see on the calendar is we have here that we would advertise the position starting February 6th. So I just kind of threw that number out based on where we are. That date out based on where we are today. Okay, so we need a little bit of time, as you can see, between tomorrow and February 3rd. We need to finalize your criteria, create the brochure, make sure we have the posting really clear so that we can advertise February 6th. Does that make sense? So that's really just a few weeks from now. Okay. So with that timeline, the reason why we place that there is because it does take some time to go through each of these processes. So what we put on this calendar for you to be really transparent is what are the consultant tasks between each of your kind of main events on the calendar. So you can see once the advertising starts, we also go into active recruitment. We actually need to schedule stakeholder meetings where we get input. And then we also will ongoingly provide you updates during the process, just so you know, hey, here's how many applicants, right? Here's an update on where we are in the process. And so as we're going through that, I just want to kind of bring your attention to, we would technically, I gave you, if you fast forward to apologies for not giving you a page number, I think it's page 3, but if you fast forward to March 28th is where we anticipate that could be a potential closing date. So it actually gives you about a month and a half to advertise. And then backing up to that, during that time, we would hold your stakeholder input meetings. And that would give us an opportunity to collect feedback. It also is during the time that people are still applying. And so what happens is in that feedback process, we would generate a report for you that shares with you what is the feedback that also you can use for yourself as hearing what your stakeholders are desiring a new superintendent, what kind of feedback they've given, but also for the recruits and those that are doing their own research. It's really important for them as they decide to apply that they have access to that input report as well. We would encourage you to put it on your website. It's a very public document. We present it to you at a future board meeting. But this is where between now and the closing date, we would want to hold those stakeholder meetings. I just wanted to kind of bring your attention to that and kind of give you kind of the purpose of closing the date then so that we can talk about, okay, when do we actually look at interviews? So I'm gonna go back to the stakeholder input, but just want to keep you on the calendar piece, okay? So March 23rd, if you just back up, we would actually have a second meeting. Okay, this is a second meeting. And this is where we would come to you and we would spend some time actually during open and closed session. There's a couple of things because this is a personnel issue. There's a couple of things we need to do in closed session with you. But what we want to do in our second meeting is to come back and obviously share the stakeholder input report with you. So what did the feedback, and just, it's a very brief process. We want to make sure it is something, it's a public document. We want to share it with you. Also, we would, if you decide you want to have a stakeholder interview panel, we would need you to actually identify who that is, and you would actually need to take action in appointing, and it's like an ad hoc committee, right? And so it's very similar to like your policy committee, your other committees where you have ad hocs around whatever that particular focus area is. So this process is very similar. And we have a process to help you walk through that if you decide you want to have an open process. In that second meeting, we'd also have just some time in closed session to talk about compensation. Usually you give us a range. Sometimes you may have your attorney in the space so that you can get some parameters around what that package should look like. And then also we talk about the interview procedures. We talk about questions. We talk about the schedule, and that's why it's a closed session item. Okay. Yes, jump in.
Is that March 23rd the date that you're available, or do you want us to try to do it during one of our regularly scheduled meetings?
So I would say it's I propose when potentially there's an availability, but I put TBD because I know that your schedule, I don't know your exact board meeting schedule. So you can attach it to one of your regular meetings. It just would be a little bit longer as normal, but that's up to you all. We just have to tonight make sure that Dr. Dan and I are both available. I'd always like to be there in person with you, but obviously if we can't, get us all on the same page with schedules, the Zoom option is an option. I just prefer us, to have the in-person. So this is where in a moment, once I kind of finish this, and I want you all to say, hey, let's look at the calendar and come up with the best date. Okay, does that make sense? So I'll finish through this calendar real quick, and then let's go and actually look at the dates. Okay, so potentially March 23rd, second meeting with you. Close the applications March 28th. And then we would have a couple of weeks to actually sort through those applications. And then, as Dr. Dan said, have the candidates, what we call our short list of candidates, to actually provide a video interview where you have 3 questions that they would provide responses to. And then in your third meeting, that's where we actually would bring those applications. We share with you our short list of recommendations. And then you all, notice it's a 5-hour meeting. So this would be a special meeting. I wouldn't attach this to a board meeting because you all probably wouldn't be at your best thinking. You'd be pretty exhausted. So typically, we would have a board meeting that would require us to really think about 5 hours of time, because you're going to go through all the applicants. It really is an extensive process. The only open session piece that you would potentially announce is that you're appointing your ad hoc stakeholder panel if you decide to have them as part of the process. And you would just finalize your interview schedule. That's the only open session piece. It's really quick. Most of that meeting is going to be closed session. Okay. So I'm again proposing those dates that we may not have those, but those are 2, just thinking about the timeline. Okay. And so that third meeting is actually the last meeting we actually have with you. And then we go into the actual interviews. Okay. And the interviews, again, potentially in April. I know you all have spring break, other things. So this is where I need you to kind of help us with that. But typically, depending on how you all decide your interview process, it typically could be 2 days. Sometimes it's 1. It depends on how much you want to do, because we have multiple components of the interview process. I won't go into a lot of details tonight, but typically it's 1 to 2 days. And so we just want to make sure that we all know also this is that interview process, like everyone has to be there, right? So we want to make sure we have the right dates that work for everyone. We don't want to have a situation where we are missing a board meeting, a board member, and we have interviews going on. So this is one that full commitment. So whatever date we pick tonight, we want to make sure it works really well for us. You can see on your calendars a couple of things that happen during the day. I'm not going to go into detail now because that's what we'll do in a future meeting, but you can just kind of see what happens. And then you can see the rest of it is really you picking your finalists. We have a decision-making process. We'll help facilitate for you to get to that place. You have, obviously, if you want to do a second round of interviews, you can. If you also want to do a visitation to your finalist's current place of employment, we can arrange for that. If there's any additional reference checks you want us to do, we can do that as well. But ultimately, there's the negotiation process, right? So you have to negotiate a contract. Usually they have an attorney, you have your attorney, you all may go back and forth a few times. Usually it takes about a week or so to do that, maybe 2 weeks, depending on the process. There's also a background check that we conduct. It typically takes a couple of days up to a week. So we would let you know that we have finished the background check, because that's super important. And then in the end, we kind of say around the beginning of May, you would make your announcement at a regular board meeting, because you do have to take action. Remember, this is your one action item. It's your one employee. You have to take action at a regular board meeting. And from there, you can determine how you want to do meet the candidate, with your stakeholders. You may have a meet and greet, whatever you want to do to introduce them as the new incoming superintendent. And then again, July 1st would be the start date. So you can see, based on this timeline, potentially you'll have some transition time, which is always really nice to have. But again, you can see big picture. This is the dates may or may not work for the board. So I do want to make sure we can take some time to go through that. And then really our last thing tonight is just determining those stakeholder input groups that you want us to work with Barbara on scheduling. And so I'm going to pause for a minute, because I know that's a lot, but just want to pause for a moment about the calendar, and then we'll just go through our stakeholders and any final and our criteria for your particular superintendent, and then we will be finishing. So any questions about the calendar, thoughts, concerns? This is the time to discuss.
May I just emphasize a point, and on those interview dates, once we settle those, as you're looking at your calendars, if you know there's a family wedding coming up or this and that, we really need to work around those, because this is the most important decision that you folks will be making, and we need you committed. We've had situations where we've gotten this on the calendar, we've started to set it up, then suddenly one of the board members says, oh, I can't be there for half a day or something like that. We've got to avoid that as much as possible. So if you know that there's something on the horizon, and even if it's tentative at this point, as we set that date, we just need to be real know that you're available.
Good point.
You do have a question?
It wasn't on the calendar, and maybe there's a different time to go through the process, but I'd love to kind of better understand the current process, like what questions are asked and what opportunities there are to maybe remove bias from the employment process. Somebody that has employed a lot of people and gone through the process. When I see things like video interview, things like that, they have natural kind of biases involved in that. And so because a lot of the communication of this role is written and is verbal, I kind of think about how do we include a lot more information outside of just a resume written as a way to do an evaluation versus kind of looking at somebody up front.
Good point.
Different ways that we've done some of that. And part of it is when we've gotten into the interview process, part of that would be particularly with your top 2-3 candidates. We arrange a time where you just sit and meet on a casual sort of basis. Put a couple of you with the candidate, one candidate, another couple of you with another candidate, and get all 5 of you involved. But you have an informal, you're sitting over coffee, maybe it'd be over lunch or something like that. And, as
and I think I also just mean like, is there a way to like ask, maybe instead of a cover letter or whatever the letter of intent is or whatever it's called, have questions where we can, it's like a early interview as opposed to, because there's so many studies, quite frankly, about the amount of bias that happens when you're just interacting with somebody like, oh, I like the way that they talk, or and these things, when you say I like things, there's implicit bias embedded in it. And so I just want an opportunity to do an evaluation maybe without that. Yeah. And then also do the interviews. So I'm not saying in place of, but just in addition. Yeah.
So just kind of helping with that, this is where the criteria is going to really help. This is why we love the criteria process, right? Is instead of that bias, right? And sometimes what we call the subjective ways of seeing who's the best fit, you really do need to say, does this person match the criteria based on the evidence of not only what's in their resume, but the reference checks is a big piece, right? And the questions we ask, and you will get to see those reference check notes and we'll kind of go through them with you. Also, Dr. Dan mentioned the social component, which I think is important to get like a sense and a vibe of the person, right? Versus the formal interview, which is we're sitting at the table answering questions, which sometimes I agree. I don't think that's the best way to make a decision, but you have multiple things that are happening, right, during this process. You have your stakeholder interview panel, which may give you another sense of perspective. And then also one of the things I love to do, which I love your point about bias, is in our role as consultants, we kind of pride ourselves on kind of coming with this, what we call equity and diversity and inclusion lens. So often what we'll do with you as a board is we will help facilitate, and I actually enjoy calling out some of the biases, not in a way of attacking the board, but it's more about, hey, let's be aware that we have this candidate, here's their particular lived experience, right? Let's talk about that. What does that mean in this space? And so really calling it out. Sometimes we've had boards who've asked questions that really weren't based on like criteria we can judge someone on. So we often redirect and say, okay, that's not based on criteria. That's based on maybe a subjective view. We have to revisit where is it actually based on what we said is are matched based on criteria for a superintendent. And we do actually have candid conversations about this. And so I'm glad that we have a relationship we've established through our study session work, because that actually helps us to really kind of jump into the realities of some of the bias that comes through an interview and obviously a hiring process. So thank you for bringing that up, because we're very conscious of that. And we want to continue to support you in your journey on ensuring that that does not become a barrier to the hiring process, and that you do get the best fit right through the process. And that's why we love that you'll have many different ways to decide at the end. So I think you'll feel really good about it versus just having a narrow view and making a decision. So thank you for that question.
And the part of this process that for us as your consultant becomes very intense is Nicole mentioned about checking out references. The references they give us isn't the only place we go to. again, because we're so connected, number one, when we do check those references, we do ask who else should we talk to, but we also know, they're in that district, I know somebody in that, or they've been in that, I know somebody, and we will reach out to them. I'm thinking of one, again, a search that Nicole and I did, and suddenly something came up on one candidate, and we were glad that we hadn't brought them to the board yet, because it was something that would have embarrassed the board. And we turned back to the candidate and said, "Why didn't you tell us this?" That sort of thing. And we're open to pinning down the candidates and saying, "Look, if you're going to be a superintendent, you gotta, your life's an open book. I mean, there are really few secrets that a superintendent gets to hold." And so we really go deep, and we use our connections and the connections of others. Other consultants will say, "You may want to call so-and-so," or "I've worked with this person," and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah, good point. So great questions. Any other questions about the process? I do want to say we'll go through these in future board meetings. So the question you just asked, we'll go back through this again, because as you're creating the questions, these are all things we need your feedback on. So we'll go deep into this as you go through each of the board meetings. Your second meeting we'll have with you, your third meeting. So absolutely, when you get to the end, you all should feel really good about your process. So I know for sake of time, I want to try to get you through the calendar just to see if you all have a sense of the dates working or not working for you, where we may need to adjust. And then I do need to make sure we get a sense of criteria, which we will follow up with you on and share with you, and have you all respond back to it. So you won't have to finish all that tonight, but we need to get started on the criteria too. So calendar and dates, can we try to get some feedback on that?
So March 23rd was the first one.
Yep, March 23rd. Well, let's back up to the advertisement. And we started February 6th. Does that sound okay? That's a couple of weeks from now. So typically we feel confident we can get started, but is that about right? Give or take maybe a day or so off, with depending on like AXA's schedule, you name it. But for Mac and J, we can start then. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
I think the soonest date that you can do it, and do it well,
Okay.
the better, right? Like, we want to get it out there.
Absolutely. Well, we can get it out starting tomorrow. I mean, literally, it's like, hey, there's an opening, and the details are to come, right? So we can definitely do that on like Mac and J, just us, our own network. We can start that process now. That makes sense. Once you kind of make it a public item, we can get that started. But officially, the advertisement with your criteria, you name it, February 6th is what we need just to get the brochure and everything finalized. Does that sound okay?
It's
Okay.
real estate, when they put the sign out in front of the house saying "coming soon," that's what we.
Right. Perfect. Okay. So March 23rd. No, I'm sorry. Let me back up to let's back up to February 20th through May 3rd. So that, based on our kind of timeline with advertising, we want to hold some stakeholder input sessions. These would be in person and virtual, so we could work with you on how that looks. You can see that we listed potential people that we think we should talk to, but we want to hear from you who might be missing from the list, what adjustments we need to make. And this is super important to get feedback from your stakeholders. We have 4 questions that we ask, and these are questions that show up not only in us facilitating input, but also we have an online survey for those that can't engage in that. So that way you get really good input from everyone, and giving them all an opportunity, all stakeholders, as best you can. And so the 4 questions are: what's good about the community, what's good about the district. That's part of your advertising and really, attractiveness, and what are those things people will be attracted to. Third question: what are the issues or concerns a new superintendent should be aware of? And the 4th one is: what are the characteristics that people want to see in the new superintendent? And so those are the 4 questions we would ask in an actual dialogue. It takes about an hour for each of those meetings, whether it's virtual or in person. And then also we have the online survey as well. And so what we would need from you is to know, based on that list, those are just kind of typical groups that we would talk to. But are there folks that might not be relevant for you, or folks who are missing from the list that you want us to include? And then that's when we'd work with Barbara to try to create a schedule between, I'm kind of shooting for that February 20th through March 3rd, based on kind of the advertisement and giving us time to schedule these, because you'd have to put it out there and invite people to come. So we want to give some time for that. So thoughts about that?
Are there any other groups you guys think
I don't
that
see
are
any,
listed?
I mean, I don't see anything that I can think of that is not listed.
It's a lot, yeah.
And I think we might be able to figure out a place to put this in, but Pacifica is a very community-involved kind of place, and so I Schumacher's and Lynn Adams and the folks that are in our Pacifica Collaborative, I think there may be a place for our community.
Could the Pacific Collaborative be one of the groups? I mean,
yeah.
Would that be separate than the community that's listed here?
Oh, okay, got it. Okay, didn't see that one, sorry. Yeah, actually.
I went through the list and I didn't see anything that I could think of that wasn't there.
Got it, okay.
You guys have-
I didn't see that part.
Well, and
That first week.
yeah. And just so you all know, this is something, Barbara, we'd probably kind of spend more time on, like in a separate meeting, to just flesh out like the logistics. Because what we don't want to do is have 50 meetings. Some of these we can combine. We may need to have a nighttime meeting and a daytime meeting to accommodate people's schedules. Ensuring, like your teachers, for example, ensuring that we have it at an opportune time after school hours, right? Like really making sure we're really strategic based on the needs of your community. So to your point, Superintendent Olson, I would say, you know, if you have like the collaborative, right? Absolutely. Maybe that's a sacred time they need by themselves. Maybe it is something we include in the open, but I think you all don't have to wrestle with that tonight. I think we can probably work with Barbara, and also, you know, Superintendent Olson, you have obviously contact with folks too. We can definitely brainstorm what we like about what's the best way to include folks and be as efficient without having a gazillion meetings, which is not always the most productive process. And just be okay with, you may miss some people who just can't make the meetings, and that's okay. What we do is we say the online survey is available. You stick that on your website. You encourage people to go to it. They can take it multiple times. Everything goes into the same report. So that's the great news about the process. If we miss someone because we just couldn't work it out, they couldn't make it, we may have missed a group just, you know, because we say charge it to our head, not our heart. We might have missed it, but we want to make sure, it sounds like we have the majority on the list. So then you all would just need us to, kind of help us with, here's the schedule that we can work through. And then we would again take all the input provided to you. So does that sound okay? Any particular concerns, questions about that process?
One is that first week is our school district is closed. I mean, our school district is open, but our schools are closed. So
okay.
It would, can we pack it into 2 weeks so that we don't lose any time?
Actually, yes. I put a large window, but actually usually takes about 2 weeks. So I think that's fine. I wasn't sure your particular schedule. So what I'm here is maybe February 27th through, I'm sorry, let me back up. Repeat, what's your close the 20th through the 24th?
We're closed to the 24th.
Okay.
27th through the 10th.
Yeah, Dr. D, we can make that work before the second board meeting where they're gonna get the report. What you saying? We have to usually backwards map from the second board meeting, but if we go February 27th through March 10th.
Yeah.
Yes, we should be
okay.
Together.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think we can make that work. And so Barbara, what we'll do is we'll send like our availability for those weeks, and then you can fill it. We'll send you a table and you can fill in like, here's where this stakeholder group can meet. So we'll try to give you as much availability as possible with time frames, all that. So hopefully that'll help. Okay. All right, so we feel good about that. So what we'll do is, looks like we'll change also the survey closing March 10th as well. Usually we close it at 5 o'clock. And actually we said March 10th. I'm actually going to say March 9th for the survey, because our home office actually is closed. It's in Nebraska and it closes on Friday. So we'd like to get it in by Thursday. Is typically what we like to do. And then that way our results can be ready for us Monday.
Great.
Okay.
Our regular board meeting is March 8th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that when they were wanting the one on the 23rd wanted to be a regular board meeting, but our board meeting's on March 8th?
Is that the only one that month?
It's two.
I know we have one on the 8th and one on the 29th.
But you wanna close the thing.
And that's okay, so the 29th.
The 28th, yeah, this is for their.
So typically we close the application after the second board meeting. So what we could do is Dr. D, is March 28th good for you first? So I can ask that because I think we do need to attach it to their board meeting. March 8th is too soon. So does March 29th work for you, Dr. D?
March 29th is 29th.
I'm double checking here. Yes, that should work.
Okay.
29th.
Okay. So we can make that work. Just real quick, what time would that be for you all?
Closed session is at 6.
Closed session is at 6 and the other meeting is at 7, so probably start that business at 7:30.
Okay. So we'll do close 6 o'clock, 7:30 open. And yeah, and so usually what we do is we usually go in the beginning of the agenda, get it out the way, it's fresh, and you all can move to your other business and focus, if that's okay. So we'll plan it that way, to do closed session 6 o'clock and then 7:30 your open business. And it should go pretty quick. But we'll talk to you all about potentially if you're going to have your ad hoc stakeholder interview panelist. So that would be one we'd need to decide and identify. Okay, so we'll have a process for you. And I'm not sure if you all have a feeling about that now, about having it as an open process, but that would be where we'd add that to that agenda, which takes a little bit of time, a little bit more time, but we'd walk you through that process. Any thoughts about the open process with having your stakeholder interview panel?
Probably want to think about that. We want to get as much input as possible, but I think they might need some time to consider.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll just put tentative. It's perfectly fine. And
35.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so it sounds like we would then, usually we close the applications like about a week later. So I'm gonna put April 6th on here of closing. So what that would then do is push our interviews back just a little bit, which is fine, because you will need to have, I'm sorry, your third meeting you will need to have. Dr. D, typically we need about 2 weeks before your third meeting so we can gather all the applications closed. We need a couple of weeks, sometimes a week and a half, but we need time to get all those applications organized, ready for you, the video interviews, all prepared for you all for the third meeting. And we try to give it to you ahead of time because it does take several hours to watch those. So that way your meeting isn't as long and you're not watching it for the first time in the meeting. So based on your calendar, if you have a board meeting March 29th, the third meeting would be a special one. We'd encourage it not to be attached to a regular board meeting. So how are you all feeling about, I guess now, you have a spring break, I'm assuming is coming up somewhere in here in April, is that correct?
Yeah, the first week in April.
Okay, so we've missed that, which is okay.
Starting April 3rd?
Yes.
Okay.
How is your calendars for the the following, I'm sorry, the week of, if we just basically move it back a week. So instead of April 13 or 14, what does April 20 or 21 look like? And I'm as a special meeting, no other board meeting attached to that.
There's an IBL open house on the April 20th.
Okay.
I don't know if there's more.
Well, we have a regular meeting on the 19th, but on the 26th, we can keep it on a Wednesday, and that could be a special.
I would not be here.
You will not be here, I remind you.
And it is a 5-hour meeting, so I always encourage you all to start a little earlier if you're gonna use a weekday, right? If you can. I know work schedules, things like that may be tough, but you wanna try to start it early as possible so you're not there so late. But, I mean, we've done that.
Just the weekend of the interviews then.
It would, and that's okay, but we do need to have that third meeting because you can't have the interviews without this one, right?
The dates for the interviews worked for me, but the week after that does not, so.
Okay.
And I also think there's a huge advantage in being one of the first districts to be interviewing, because I
Yep.
situations where people drop out of interviews because they're taking jobs. So
Yep.
I wonder what we could do about, so we have the meeting on the 19th, and I have to go back and look at the governance calendar, but what if we looked at what we could do or don't have to do, or maybe even have on some other day a brief meeting to keep business flowing, not a lot of presentations, but what if you use the 19th as this time, so it would be mostly closed, right? Mostly closed session, right?
It's kind of a split.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and I think, I know the 19th, I am actually not in town, and I probably couldn't even, and Zoom doesn't work for this type of meeting, by the way. Like, it is important, we're all in person. So the 19th doesn't work well for me, unfortunately.
When are you in town that week?
So the 20th works, the 21st works, even the 22nd. I know sometimes Saturdays we've done this as well, and then it's earlier in the day. So I don't know, Dr. D, your schedule, but the 20, 21, 22 works.
That's when the interviews were, so that
Yeah,
shifts
we
them
don't-
to another week. That's the problem, is trying to hold.
Okay.
I kind of need to try to hold the 2 days of interviews on the 21st and 22nd.
Yeah, let's.
Well, what this would do is if you're pushing things back, then you would want to push the interviews back. Usually if you have the third meeting, usually you would have your interviews the following week, because you want to give people opportunities to prepare. So typically what this would mean is we push the interviews back a week. I'm not sure how that works for you all.
So what if we did this? What if we said we want to hold on to April 21st and 22nd and push the other stuff up?
Meaning
the 5-hour meeting. Meaning the 5-hour meeting could be April 12th? 12th.
Let's see, April 12th. So unfortunately, that one's not free.
Okay, tell us what's open that week, 11th, 12th, 13th, 10th.
Okay.
10th is easy.
April 11th is open. I'm not sure, Dr. D, how that works for you, but it's open for me.
Okay.
Can we stick with the 13th or 14th?
Let's see, 13, 14. Possibly. Well, I want to say yes, and then it sounds like you all want to continue. So Dr. D, what that would mean is we'd have a kind of a short turnaround after the applications close, and we could push the application closure date up a little bit more is what we could do, because it'd be quite a bit of time anyway. So we can make it work. So you want to stick with 13, 14, or 14, and then keep our interview schedules as the 21st, 22nd?
Yeah.
The 14th would work better for me because I work on the 13th.
Okay.
So,
in the evening? Oh.
It's a
No, but it's a 5-hour.
So that's the 5-hour meeting.
It's a 5-hour, yeah.
You're at 7 and
You
we'll
wanna
be
be
here till
awake
12.
Yeah, you want to be awake.
Okay. We'd probably not want to do it at 9:30 at night.
Yeah.
Please don't. What about?
Are you all open? Are you all open to the Saturday, the 15th of April? Then you can start a little bit earlier. Maybe you start at like noon or something like that. And that way you can, or you can start early. Yeah.
No.
I hear no.
On that day.
What about
Okay.
on the 14th? That works.
I could be here at
That'll work.
20.
I don't have.
12:30, 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock on the 14th. Dee, does that work for you?
Absolutely.
What time?
Yay.
On the 14th?
Okay. Let's do it.
Everybody?
It'd be 6 o'clock.
Okay. This could work. Dr. D, works for you too?
Yes.
Okay, so then what we can do is if their board meetings on the 29th, then what we could potentially do is have the closing date, just to give us enough time. The closing date could be early the week of April 3rd. Is what I'm thinking. Maybe we make it April 3rd. It gives us at least a week and a half, because we do need time to not only finish our screening process, but we got to let folks know about the video piece. So that part does take a few days to get those back. So, and then we want to get it to you all ahead of time too, so that your time is not so long. So maybe we'll say April 3rd-ish could be our closing date.
Yep.
And we said the 14th at 1:30, is that what we said?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock, okay.
1 o'clock, okay, so 1 o'clock to potentially, it may not go 5 hours, by the way, I'm just kind of giving you a broad range, it depends on your discussion. So if you all do your homework ahead of time, it actually goes faster too, so. All right, so it sounds like we might be okay, so we go April 14th, 1 to 6, and then keep our interview dates, April 21st, and I'm gonna say 22nd, so you wanna keep both if you all are gonna potentially have a 2-day process. I would not put yourself in a box and say it'll only be 1 day because you haven't seen the candidates yet. So we often say hold the 2 days, and if you need 1 day, we can pick which one at that time. And we just listed as those are the 2 dates, so candidates know to block off their calendars, right? To make sure they have not planned anything either for those 2 days. So how does that sound? No weddings, birthdays, trips around the world?
Yeah, just a point of process. We're doing a lot of detail work, and we haven't quite decided or discussed that yet. So we spent like an hour and a half on this, and I just want to make sure that we're all aligned and going forward before we do all the dates.
No problem. Good point.
Yeah, and one of the details is just the criteria, right? Like, what are we looking for? So that is something we want to hear from you tonight. But I think it's important in order to even advertise a job, you do need to have a time frame. And then to your point, what we can do is actually, you see in the calendar, we have little bullet points for you, but we can actually spell out some of the details if it helps prior to those meetings. But that's where your second and third meeting are going to help you with the details, if that makes sense. But if there's anything you're still have a question about, this is a good time to ask, if there's any detail that you're still missing from the process, but we do need to have a calendar. Yeah, jump in.
We do have a question.
Nicole,
Yep.
we have to vote. We would like to actually go ahead and vote. I know we're interrupting your calendar walkthrough, but I feel like we should probably vote to move forward with you.
Yep.
We actually get too much deeper. Thanks for bringing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So where we're at is.
It's a good tactic, though.
Do we have any emotion? Well, do I have any questions?
Well, you have a public comment.
Yes, public comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gwendolyn Holden.
Let me elevate her.
Okay.
Should I be on the screen?
She will be.
Want me to do it?
She's in.
Okay.
There we go. I got it now.
Hi, Gwendolyn. You have 3 minutes to talk about anything you'd like with the superintendent search.
Okay. Yay. Okay. There I am for real. Okay. Hi, sorry. Yeah, so anyways, I wish I would have started on the public comment part at 7 o'clock, but here we are, it's fine. Kind of seconding what Kai and Laverne was saying, I kind of feel like I'm speaking to the choir here a little bit. And also, Will had said that we're already doing a really good job over the years as far as meeting the criteria, but as serving students with special needs. But the one thing I just wanted to point out, so you guys had a resolution that you passed in June 24th of 2020 regarding the George Floyd situation. And all I just wanted to bring up here is that, just to restate it, just so you guys have this in the forefront of your memory when you're starting to think about criteria. You said, whereas this tragic event is not isolated, but one incident in a long history of violence against Black Americans and people of color stemming from bias, discrimination, and racism. And whereas the district seeks to make clear its commitment to support Black Americans, American Indians, Latinos, and other students of color and families, which benefits all students. Whereas the district is committed to fostering an environment which all students are able to learn and excel, whatever their natural origin, ethnicity, religion, and sexual orientation, ability, gender, or socioeconomic status. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Pacifica School District will support Black Americans, American Indians, minorities, other students of color through hiring teachers of color, and be it further resolved, a school board racial equity committee shall be created and dedicated to address the racial equity in the school district, and be it further resolved that the district will work closely with the committee, other local government resources to ensure that Black American students and students of color are able to receive an education in a supportive environment. And almost done. Be it further resolved that the district will work and the school prison pipelines for students of color, and be it resolved that the superintendent is directed to work with district staff and local agencies, council, and committee members to develop and revise policies and/or procedures to preventive measures when Pacifica School District students are in contact with law enforcement. So my request is that this resolution that was done in June 24th of 2020 be considered when you're thinking about the process for a superintendent. And that's all.
Thank you. Thank you for being patient. You were holding on there a really long.
Yeah, I know, right? Okay, I'm going to sign off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. Do we have any other questions before we move on to motions on this particular item?
Well, I just have a question. If this is the only company we're looking at, or is there another backup for the search?
If we didn't feel like this was the company that we wanted to work with, we would go out and seek another company. We don't have multiple that we're considering at this point because we felt like this would meet our needs because of our relationship with Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Okay. Well, do I
any other
sorry.
discussion? I don't want us to rush to any. This is an important decision.
Maybe that's what it is, the rushing part.
Right.
But it has to be done.
Do you want to hold on to the question? Or, we can, personally, I love you guys, I've been busy, but, we can hold. We don't have to vote on this contract tonight. We can do some calendaring, like, not in this moment. But if you feel like you want to consider other agencies, you should say that and say you want to hold. And if you want to hold, I can support you in that. It's not that we don't want to work with them. If you want to evaluate something else, it's fine.
I'm okay with voting. I just feel like we maybe should have had some competition. And I love Nicole Anderson and what she's doing for our district, but maybe it goes back to the way I am. Like when I'm going to do a big purchase, I check out 3 different places and then I make a decision. Mm-hmm. But I'm okay with voting. I just wanted to see if there was any apprehension.
All right. Well, do I have a motion to approve the district entering into the proposed contract with McPherson and Jacobson to assist in the superintendent search process? So do I have a motion to approve?
I'll motion to approve, entering into McPherson and Jacobson.
All right, do I have a second? I'm going to go ahead and second. Barbara, would you take the vote?
Yes, all in favor, please raise your hands. Motion passes 4-0.
All right. So should we continue with the calendar?
Yeah, I was going to say that. Assuming you're voting no. Right, yeah.
4-1.
Does oppose.
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I'm getting tired.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I think success criteria was the next piece, do we feel like we have the strength to do that?
We didn't finish the calendar.
Are we, oh, sorry.
How many days do we need to finalize? Because we are at 9:52, so.
Well, there's, okay, just right here.
Just right there, just a couple.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the interviews were the 21st and 22nd?
Let me check that.
Then I think it's in May 1st or 5th, but our board meeting is.
May 10th.
May 10th. So if that's selected, that could be May 10th, that would solve a lot of problems.
Does that work?
Well, it has to happen during a regularly scheduled board meeting. You can't do it during a special meeting, so.
That's correct.
And technically, you wouldn't have to be there. I mean, it'd be great if you were, but you don't typically go to the board approval, right?
It varies. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But it's not mandatory.
Right.
So it'd be May 10th.
And we also have May 31st. Or is it close?
I would encourage you, if your meeting's on the 10th, to go with the 10th, because that helps add to the transition period, because as soon as that person knows, they're gonna wanna start interacting with the Superintendent Olson and you folks and this and that, before they walk in the door officially.
That's a good point. Is everyone okay with that, Dee? Okay.
Now, the second round of interviews, is there a Zoom option on that, or would that be something we'd have to find all of us to be back in
The
person?
second round of interviews?
It says tentative second round of interviews.
But
Just to clarify, we don't necessarily have second rounds. It's very rare, but it is an option. Some boards might feel they need to. Sometimes it's just the second day of your 2 days of interviews. So it really depends. But right now it's kind of in theory because you don't know who those candidates are going to be yet. So we just put that in there just in case if you decide, and if you want to do additional reference checks and also a visit to their current place of employment. So those are all things that can happen in that time frame. Hope that helps.
Second interviews on that same day, remember?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You can do it the same day. You can call them back. Sometimes we'll tell the candidates, hey, stick around. The board may want to call you back, right? So those are all things we just take your direction and you decide that. So the goal is you get it all done April 21st and 22nd. That's the goal, and it usually works pretty well.
Yeah.
it's a good tight process.
So if you all feel pretty good about the schedule, I want to acknowledge the feeling of rushing because one is I want to acknowledge it's late. So sometimes board meetings aren't the best time to make our best decisions. But here's the good news. We will revise the calendar here to have the updated dates. We'll send it back to you so you all have it. You're always welcome to reach out to us at any point if you have questions. And what we will do is use this as one part of your advertisement to make sure that now your candidates will know, your applicants will know what the time frame is. And then we can plan accordingly. The last piece of it is really more about your criteria. So we do need to have a little bit of direction tonight. You don't have to do it all tonight. What we typically do is we just want to have a quick understanding of the key characteristics you may want to see in your next superintendent. We'll then take that and we have sample criteria that we have shared in the brochure. So you saw the brochures we sent, you can see there's criteria. And I think I sent you 3 or 4. And those are sample language, including like equity leader, things of that nature, typical things that show up in superintendent criteria. If you want additional samples, we're always welcome to send those to you. And then what we do is individually, we will email you and ask you for feedback to us so that there's no violation of Brown Act. And then what we do is collectively take that information and then we would present that to you for final kind of approval, that makes sense. And that's where typically what we do is board president, point of contact typically would have that conversation. But tonight, because you're all together, this is where that discussion is a little bit important so that we get a sense of direction about big picture. What do you want to see? And then that way you can give us a little bit of feedback and then we can kind of cater the language for you. You may have something you want to alter. I want to acknowledge public comment about the resolution. I have in my notes to include maybe some of that language, specifically around equity leader is great guidance for that one. But I think this will be a great opportunity just to get your feedback pretty quickly. I know Dr. D, you're there. And so if you can make sure that I don't miss anything on my end as we maybe go to each board member, just ask, what is maybe that top criteria you want to see in this next leader? That's typically helpful. We want to hear all 5 of you, but then ultimately we can give you language that matches that. And then we finalize that with you in the next few weeks through your point of contact, if that makes sense. So we know what exactly you want to see in your brochure. We'd send you the brochure and then we'd actually get your final thoughts. And so this is where you usually give direction to president and obviously your point of contact to communicate with us on behalf of the board. But tonight we want to hear from everyone, if that makes sense.
And I did provide them with a laundry list of those.
Perfect. So I'll just kind of listen in. And Dr. D, if you want to go ahead and just facilitate each one and make sure I don't miss anyone.
I'll go first, hopefully giving folks a little bit of time to go through yours. I'll just give my top 3 from the that you provided. It was very helpful to have that list, so thank you for that. The first, kind of using the language that you had, was the innovative leader or education leader who is forward thinking. I just want to really focus in on, taking this district to the next level, given the future of what the future of work looks like, what the future of higher ed looks like, is going to require somebody that thinks differently. And so that's a really big piece that I think I value a lot in a leader, and I think that's part of the reason I was asking questions around non-traditional applicants, because a lot of experience may not be the direction that we necessarily need. The second that I picked was community-centered. Obviously, this is a tight-knit community, so being engaged in the community is really important. But also, and what's very important to me, is recruiting more students in the community, getting somebody that's able to talk to parents, make sure that when we launch our TK or pre-K, I forgot what it's called, it's a full set of kids, and every Pacifica student feels confident in attending Pacifica School District. So that's the second one that's important for me. And then the third one that's not on your list, but a lot of the priorities that we've been talking about kind of lead to this, is operational leader. And I don't know what the right terminology is for that.
That's it.
We have a lot of big projects like workforce housing. We have new teaching and learning projects that our esteemed superintendent has launched, which is fantastic. So we'll need somebody that can juggle a lot of those things. We have maintenance and operations issues. We have we have a lot of major things to tackle. That's not just keeping the ship going, but actually steering it into a different direction. And it just takes somebody that can do a lot of different things like that.
Awesome.
Those are my 3.
Perfect. All right.
I think Needy covered the same ones. Community-centered focus, community-centered leader was important to me, especially in a small town, and people have been here for a couple generations, and getting the community behind you is invaluable and actually necessary.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth.
So, of course, I want somebody who's focused on equity.
Okay.
I definitely want somebody who's going to be focused on our curriculum and because of, helping our students get above and beyond instruction.
Okay.
It wasn't on your list, and I'm not even sure how to describe it. I mean, in a very simple way, it's a good listener, but this community is very diverse. A lot of perspectives, and you have to be a very good negotiator and a problem solver. There are some very complicated problems that this person is going to have to deal with. And there's going to be a lot of input from a lot of different people, and you're going to have to listen to a lot of people, bring them to the table and figure it out and come to a solution. So I'm not sure how to put that in words, but that is going to be their job. So they need to know. Make sure everyone feels heard, and then work to solve the problems that come up in this district.
Okay. That's good. Thank you, Kai. Appreciate that.
I would just put in the equity
Mhm.
piece. And I know I can't say that, but maybe somebody who's familiar with other cultures.
That's a good one.
Just give you an example is, I think that our suspensions may be a difference in culture, a difference in lifestyles, and how we communicate. Somebody who could foresee that with the students.
Got it. Okay.
At the same time, bringing us to a higher level of education in our math, reading, and science. And then also, I was just looking through here, and one of them that's a must, and let me find it, was, I can't find it, but I think it was the communication part. With 21st technology, and right now we are paying how much? 40,000, 45 for somebody to send out our communications. So I'm hoping that we can, maybe put that money towards a salary. So somebody who has really good written skills and who can put them down in a decisive manner. If that makes sense.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. All right. Last but not least.
Well, I'm really happy to hear pretty much everything I was thinking was covered by the team.
Okay.
I mean, I think equity and diverse candidate pool is incredibly important for us. And I also think having a clear vision on where you want to go, because it's hard to lead people in a direction if they don't have a clear vision of where that place is. But I agree with all my peers here with input there, so.
Perfect. Okay. All right, Dr. D, I know you got some great notes. I think I captured it all, and just appreciate the relationship we have, because a lot of what you shared is, I think, what we worked on, like, as a board, and really understand not just effective governance, but the equity lens, and a lot of what you shared, Laverne. I heard the suspensions, right? We've talked about that, right? So these are all things that really make sense. And so the samples you have give you language. What we do now is take what you've shared, really massage it, kind of give you the language, give it back to you, see if there's any adjustments that you need to make. And then from there, I think it's captured, it gives us already a good sense of what you're looking for. So this criteria will then drive like next steps. So Barbara will be in touch with you with just kind of, here's what we captured. And then, like I said, the easiest way is to communicate with each of you individually versus having a collective board meeting all over again. What we do typically, again, is you usually give direction to president and point of contact collaboration there. And then also, if necessary, we've also met with just 2 board members, right, to have the conversation about the work, so that you all don't have to have another meeting to meet about criteria, if that makes sense. So any questions about next steps for the criteria? This is really helpful. Okay. I do have one final question, and then I promise we'll leave you alone, is the requirements and the preferences. So I think this is something really important to know, is, do you have a requirement / preference for people's language, like being bilingual, having executive cabinet experience, being a teacher, things of that nature? Is there anything that you all feel that is kind of, I call it a non-negotiable, where like, we have to have this as a requirement? And then are there some preferences particularly?
If you look at the bottom of page 15 onto 16, you'll see some examples of what we elsewhere.
A preference for a bilingual person, preferably Spanish, but I think that is important. I think classroom experience would be nice. It's a nice to have. It's not a, for me, if somebody's been an administrator a long time, they might be great at it, so I'm not gonna say that just because you've never been in a classroom, but it was nice because I think we have a very close-knit community.
Mm-hmm.
To see our superintendent come to the classroom every now and then.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask clarity? I think I heard you, but can I ask clarity? Was that elementary experience or just classroom teacher experience is maybe a preference, but not a requirement? I just want to clarify what I heard.
It would be my preference. I'm not going to speak for the whole board.
Okay.
I would prefer somebody who does have classroom experience.
Okay.
Because I just think it makes our community closer. I noticed the kids are very happy to see their superintendent come in the classroom and actually teach on occasion. So I think that anyone who's done that before is more comfortable with the experience. So it's just a preference for me. I don't know. I'm not speaking for everybody else.
Okay.
In the past, we required a doctoral degree. I think we put it as preference this time to open it up to more people. But
good idea.
Right.
Yeah, good idea.
And I think I'd like to see some candidates who have a lot of experience in curriculum and applying it and moving it along. I mean, getting things done.
Okay.
And also the bilingual Spanish, that would be helpful.
Okay. Can I ask, going back to the curriculum just real quick, I feel like that's going to be part of our criteria. But how does that look in position? Like there's some things, this is just clear cut. They have this on their resume or they don't, right? And that helps us with screening. So I hear the classroom teacher piece, but are you okay with the curriculum being embedded in the criteria? Because I think that varies from position, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
I'm going to lean to your expertise on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's subjective, I think, based on people's experience of how deep their implementation of curriculum is. Those are, I think, interview questions you ask. Those are different things you can ask based on experience. But your point about something is clear cut is they're bilingual or not. Is that a requirement or is that a preference?
It's a preference. It's a
strong
preference.
A strong preference, I'd say.
And then,
strong preference, okay.
I don't see this on your list, but it would be nice to see somebody who has either worked or volunteered in a diverse community.
Okay.
Somebody who's either worked with Indigenous people or volunteered with a Black youth organization. I would like to see on their resume. So somebody who's actually done work in a community that is, a diverse population, somebody who's worked with a homeless youth program, something that I volunteer, I've worked in a community, I spent time with some unique people to meet. I see that, so that's a preference.
Okay. So preference is what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I'm my preference, I'm speaking for my.
Okay. No, it's okay. I'm just writing them down and you all can kind of collectively say yes, but this is helpful. So I hear a lot of preferences: doctoral degree, classroom teacher, bilingual, experience in either volunteering or working in a diverse community and or district, I want to say, because I think there's kind of a twofold there. Anything else around like cabinet experience? This would be helpful to know. Is it someone you want to have had experience in cabinet? Meaning assistant soup, depending on the district, a coordinator, director could or could not be depending on the district, right? On how they structure it, but someone who's had cabinet level experience specifically.
Is that a normal requirement that you see?
It is. It is. It could be a preference though, because again, the non-traditional, it allows people to have a non-traditional path.
Yeah.
To make it a preference.
I would say that, yes. I would say if that's a normal thing that you see in a superintendent search, we want that too. Anything that would be a general normal.
Okay.
What we're looking for.
But I think if it's a preference, then, then otherwise we're excluding the non-traditional.
I also just want to acknowledge that even having a lot of preferences looks like requirements as well. I think it's good to start with a lot, but I don't know what the final list is.
That would make it criteria. Like if they have it.
This is most of it. Yeah, here's why. If you don't have criteria around like requirements and preferences, what happens is it makes it harder for us to narrow down your pool. So for example, if you said something like it's required you're bilingual in Spanish, for example, where if it's a requirement, that's going to eliminate a whole lot of people. And we often recommend don't require it unless it's absolutely necessary in the community to be successful at that job. But we don't want to eliminate anyone, including your non-traditional folks. I agree. Having these, this is pretty much it, Dr. D. I'm thinking there's not many more, but these are the ones we do need to find out so that we can be able to screen. Go ahead, Needy.
Somebody that's in like a CBO position, they'll hit the preferred cabinet, but they may not be bilingual. They may not have the volunteer experience. They may not have the classroom. So they'll look at that preferences thing and say, oh, well, I don't really have most of these. So I'm probably not the right candidate, but they might be a great candidate. So that's the only, how do we manage that? And maybe I'll seek your advice there, Nicole. I just don't want to discourage.
Yeah, I think when people look at the criteria versus
the fight, yes, that's it.
Criteria and say, I meet the criteria.
Right.
I think
that's it.
So I think one of the kind of biases is, there's what women do and what men do. Like women's look at a whole list and out of 8 and they don't meet one of them, they're like, I'm not qualified. I mean, that could be one, I'm not saying all women, all men, but that could be one where a man might say, I can do those 2, okay, I'm qualified. So it's just, we want to, maybe that list, if that's an internal piece in terms of what we're looking for versus being a part of our advertisement.
I think that's a good differ a little bit on this, but I would discourage you from keeping that preferred list short. I will tell you, I landed my first superintendency and I looked at that preferred list and said, well, I don't have a couple of items on that, so I wasn't going to apply. And then at the last minute I said, no, I'm going to just have the ring, and I ended up their superintendent. So sometimes that list can discourage some people.
Also, you can have someone that's culturally diverse that may not be fluently bilingual, so, but may have grown up in that culture. So it's, are you looking for the diversity or for the specific language?
For me?
Does that make sense?
For me, well, I'm just looking for somebody who is familiar with more cultures.
Yeah, but I mean,
other than
somebody could have grown up
themselves.
and be a descendant in that culture, but not necessarily be fluently bilingual. So that could eliminate, it depends on what generation. So.
And
I just want to make sure we have the biggest pool we possibly have.
Yeah.
Only interest here, guys.
The public is from our internal.
That's right. Yeah.
So if we do, that takes.
I agree. I agree.
Yep. Yeah. I think honestly, you're safe with preferences. I think you do need to be clear about here's what we prefer. I think you do say that because the criteria may not explicitly say it. One of the great things is that people are interested in the job and really serious about it do reach out to us, and we do talk to them a little bit more about, hey, watch meetings like this, watch the board, really listen, but also help them understand what that means in terms of the preferences. But if you keep it from being required, then you typically keep it open to people, and that way it doesn't discourage. And again, this job is open to internal and external candidates. So we want to make sure you're really clear about the criteria and not eliminating anyone who would be, potentially a good match for the district. So I think if you stay with preferences, you'll be fine. You won't scare people away. But I think what you do want to do is give us clear direction. And this helps us in this conversation because we'll do the recruiting, we'll do the screening, and we get to that third board meeting. And when you get to see all the applicants, then we can actually discuss this piece just here. And you can say, this one's bilingual, this one is not, this one is, this one isn't. And those can be things you consider. So when we say something like bilingual, do you have a particular language, right? Also that you want to include. Typically Spanish is one. Some districts say it's Tagalog. Some say it might be Vietnamese. So you got to also be clear on bilingual in what languages.
I think you said Spanish.
She said Spanish. Yeah.
Just Spanish? Okay.
Bilingualism is a great thing for anyone, and we value that. We'd really value Spanish. That would help in the position.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. All right. That helps. Excellent.
For our language, it's Spanish. I feel like I remember it that way. We have to go.
Cool.
Leaving it at is that if the individual is bilingual, they have experience about being a second language learner somewhere. And that's what you really want, so that they're empathetic towards your EL learners. And that's what I think you're really seeking.
I just have one more. It has to do with the community building and attending, school functions after hours. I know, there might be a superintendent out there who's like, oh no, I gotta be home right at 5 o'clock, and I feel like.
They're not ready to be a superintendent if they have that thinking, so that. But I'm joking.
She didn't know that was an option. She went to say,
We're coming off of the pandemic right now, and, right now we're even seeing Nicole on screen. So, just getting back into the tradition of school functions and being out there recruiting, there might be
that's right.
who are functions.
But we did, of you mentioned community involvement, and so when we do this write-up, that's typically a piece.
We'll add that in, yeah.
Visible, da-da-da-da-da.
Yep.
They're not really wanting to be a superintendent.
Absolutely, yeah. Present and visible, we'll add that in there, Laverne.
Thank you.
But if they want to be home by 5, superintendency is probably not the position for them, so. So you've all feel pretty good about the process so far. I know it's a lot late at night, but you've done a lot tonight. I think you'll feel better when we mirror back what you shared with us and following up. But do you all feel pretty good about kind of where you're going, the process? For the most part, there's a lot of details you'll still learn along the journey. But for the most part, do you have any final questions or thoughts about the process? It's because we want to let you all go. As we understand it's getting pretty late, but I think we have what we need, Dr. D, from my perspective, and questions from you as the board. Barbara, having any questions?
Fall asleep on us.
we have more items.
See, more of an agenda to go through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You good? Okay, we look forward to it, and just really honored to continue to partner with you. This is the most important decision you'll make, so we are super honored and just elated and excited to get the process officially started. So there's some great folks out there, by the way. We didn't get to emphasize that. So we have no doubt that you will have some great candidates and a finalist who will fill the shoes of Superintendent Olson and continue on the great work that you are doing to elevate to the next level. So just really honored. Again, thank you all for your great work tonight. And again, reach out anytime during the process to either one of us, and we will be available to support you, okay?
Thank you for fitting us in.
All right, excellent. So Barbara, we'll be in touch, all right?
Yes.
Thank you both.
All righty, take care, everybody. Thanks, Dr. D.
Thank you.
So we have 2 more items. We're at the point where we probably should have somebody make a motion. So we're almost at 10:30, which means we have to have somebody make a motion to extend the meeting to 11, and somebody to second and a quick vote on that one.
I'll make a motion to extend the meeting to 11.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I'm not really in favor.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Favor is a strong word.
But it's 2 items, let's knock it out, let's go.
We can do it. Anybody
Okay.
who needs to take a break, feel free to get up and take a break if you need to.
Let's power through it. All right, here we go. So, potential public-private partnership with the city of Pacifica, feasibility study. So discussion point, Dr. Olson.
Okay, so I am summarizing the report that went in front of.
Action too, sorry.
Oh, yeah, possible action, that went in front of the city council on December 12th. And it was the results of the feasibility study that really asked 2 questions. Number 1, is it feasible to redevelop a small piece of city property, about 0.75 of an acre, into multifamily affordable housing with new PSD office built on the ground floor of about 11,000 square feet, which is what these 2 buildings are. And is it feasible to adapt or redevelop the current district office site with our M&O facility to be joint city district maintenance operation and city public works offices? And so the answer to that is just globally is yes, it is possible, but some more information is needed. So one is that the city's property at 151 Milagro is approximately 0.75 of an acre.
there's a couple of factors. There's a stormwater drain that goes under the city site, which you can't build over. And it would require environmental clearance. The second piece is that our property, which is 1.6 acres, has a couple of things going with it. Is that while it's adjacent to Valamar School, that part of this property is used for school pickup and drop-off. That western road right there is used by the police department. And then the third piece is that the current M&O building is near Calera Creek. And there are currently limitations to building within 100 feet of a creek. So yes, it could be possible, but the next step in determining feasibility would be what's called a fit study. And that's typically done by an architect that says, okay, a building with X number of units and a district office would need this amount of space, and on this piece of property, you can't do it over that storm drain, so is it possible to do it there? And so the architect looks to see what can be built on the Milagro site, as well as what could be built here. Be more definitive about the city and district requirements, and then by doing that, that helps to see, is it worth it to go forward with the next steps? So in terms of affordable housing, the consultant said that it is absolutely feasible to build multifamily affordable housing, and it would pencil out in a way that a developer would be interested in doing that. So we've been asked by the city, they are interested in moving forward with the study. They would fund it for approximately $5,000 to $10,000. They have affordable housing money to fund it, meaning the study, the $5,000 to $10,000. To us, the cost would be staff time. So that would be my time and Josie's time. They actually made it very, very easy. They don't want to move forward if we're not interested in moving forward. So the question is, shall we inform the city of Pacifica that we're interested in continuing this analysis at this point?
So, just for clarification, they would build the city of Pacifica would build affordable housing on school district property?
On city property, which is over there on Milagro.
So it's not ours?
It would not be affordable housing for us?
No, the property that's on Milagro, is it owned by the district or the city?
It's currently owned by the city.
Okay.
And we own this property. And so ultimately, if in fact, like this is such a complex thing that would
You forgot the part that it would have the district office in it. I think that's what's confusing her. You only mentioned the affordable housing and the district office part.
Yeah, so we would move, because I'm trying to figure out, so we would move to that property, and then this property would become what?
Would become maintenance and operations, like we would share, the city calls it a corp yard, we call it our maintenance and operations yard, but we would share, like, do we need to have 6 lawnmowers? Well, they have 6 and we have a couple, so how could we share our trucks, our services, those kinds of things?
So I'm trying to figure out what's the benefit for the district.
The benefit to the district would be, I know it's hard to believe, but at some point this 50-year-old building is going to be done. So it would be a new district office that is well located, easily accessible by either walking or bus transit if families needed to be there. So mostly it would be a new district office. Now don't think that the district office would come for free, right? Like, so there would be the construction of the multifamily housing would be probably done by a developer, and there may be some space in there. There would be some cost to the district in terms of building out some of the offices or the conference room. It would not be no cost.
Because I'm just thinking, is this gonna cost us money, or are we gonna make money from it?
We're not gonna
It sounds
make
like
money.
we're gonna spend money, because if we change offices, then it's gonna be some cost to us, whereas there are sites that possibly we could lease to the city where we could actually get a financial benefit from working with the city, building something there. It just seems to me I know we're gonna need a new building. I'm not, but I would prefer that if the school district enters into any, and I'm okay with them doing the study, but if we enter into anything with the city contractually, there has to be a financial benefit to the district because we need more money coming into the district. So maybe a partner, like we have our workforce housing, maybe a partnership that the city could have some of that housing so that we get some money from the city as well. So I'm thinking about it as what is the benefit to us? And right now I'm not hearing a great benefit to us.
At this point, it's just, is this something that would be something that we want to pursue? And the question is not, do we want this or do we want to make money doing this? It's really, do we want to move forward with the next set of study?
Yeah,
Just
they
to
were
say,
looking into childcare also.
Yeah,
like childcare. So
is the study going to come back with this? How does it benefit both parties, or is it just to say we can build this building here?
the study would only say, can we build this building? It would have to be determined that, city wants to move forward with the affordable housing. I think, what we've seen from their presentations and their need for RENA numbers is they need affordable housing, especially family housing, right? There's a lot of senior housing, but not a lot of family housing. So
I think my concern is that there's not, the only numbers I see is 5 to 10,000. And then saying that, well, there will be costs down the road. I'm just a little worried about coming into a contract with the city when we're still trying to get our workforce housing. And in a sense, that's part of the city too, because they have to approve things, right? So how long would this project take?
This might not even get started for 10 or 15 more years. Like this is like, they say to, like if they were really interested, it might be 3 years, but this is beyond probably any of us that are sitting here. I certainly know it's not beyond me, but it's certainly probably beyond. But that when they first proposed that, we knew that was the case. Maybe?
Yeah, so one thing that I would say is affordable family housing is definitely a benefit to the district. And so I just want to acknowledge that because we need students, if anybody's been 10 people on the call listening. And this feels, I mean, it's your time, not mine, but it feels like a no regrets move to at least take the next step. It's no cost to us today. I think these questions are very valid to say, how do we make sure there's some financial or monetary near-term benefit if we decide to do this? But yeah, that was just my thought, that at least the architectural assessment feels like a no regrets move.
I would recommend that we move forward on this end, just because I think we got enough information like, yes, this would be a benefit to the community, and it seems when somebody says, yes, you absolutely could, the plot of land is quite small and that storm drain does create an issue. We have all seen the issues with creeks and recognize why you don't build close to that. So I think it's important to know it may just end at this point, right? Like, no, it just isn't feasible. But I don't think we have to make those kind of decisions today. So it would be my recommendation that you consider. I just need direction. It doesn't necessarily need to be a vote, but I think based on what we saw here,
I
I'd
saw
like
the
to see a
city's
vote.
presentation, and there's a lot of reasons why it may not go through because of the storm drains and so forth. But we need the affordable housing. They're talking about a child care. We eventually need a district office. So and they do have the funds, and they're willing to spend those funds on checking it out. And that's not, we wouldn't be entering in a contract. It would just matter of them going through with this.
And the other thing is the politics of it. City council, they have their own separate politics from the school board. And I just feel like that meshing may not benefit the school district. Right now, if you go to a city council meeting, it's quite contentious. Almost always, depending on what is on the agenda. And yes, we need affordable housing for the city. but that's not our job. Our job is to educate the kids. And so that's kind of where I'm seeing like down the road. Yeah, we could vote yes and, have the next board members deal with it, but there's still gonna be the money part of it. I don't believe it would be free.
No, this part that we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, but I'm talking
That's just
about
the one,
down.
that's for a decision later.
This opens up, this gives the option to a different board or whatever, versus by saying, no, we remove this option. I think that was my consideration of like, I don't know what this is gonna be.
Well,
It's
then
very
how
possible
can we
with the
vote on
creek,
something we
with the
don't know
creek
is
and the
gonna
pipes
be?
and the flooding right now, it's possible it won't get past this.
So just remember, I'm just simply asking you, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think
You have to give them permission to do a feasibility study.
They don't wanna go ahead without it.
Yeah, they're just asking us.
Yeah, they don't wanna waste the money if we're never gonna do this, right? Like, I mean, if we're truly like, nah, we're not doing that, they don't wanna move forward.
But why are they putting it on us when it's their job to do the affordable housing and the daycares?
Because they're including a district office and it includes our lands. It would
Because
eventually.
they'd have to move all their machines over
Yeah.
here, and they wanna make sure we're okay with that arrangement.
And is that, like I said, I'm really concerned about the finances. I'm not, like, a feasibility study, I do understand it's just to see if we can do, if they can build the building.
So
But
I'm
if this moves forward, from there, I have a lot of apprehension around how does this benefit the district, especially financially? We cannot, as a district, take financial risk that, other places can take. We can't. So we have to be very clear about, okay, City of Pacifica, we are the school district, but whatever decisions are made, they have to benefit our school district, period.
So just to kind of speed things up so that we can also talk about a $230,000 security camera. So could we, because I'm hearing mixed things, I would like a vote on just direction on,
The feasibility.
yeah, should we inform the City of Pacifica that we're interested in continuing this analysis?
So do we have a motion to approve the City of Pacifica going forward with a feasibility study regarding the district's potential partnership with the city?
All motion to approve?
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, and Barbara, will you take the vote?
All in favor, raise your hands, please. So motion passes 3-2.
All right.
All right, last one is security cameras. We did put this one on the agenda. We thought that we'd do it in February 8th. But honestly, it does help us to have a little bit of an approval earlier because then we can get some more work done during the breaks. So Christy Novak has been here for a long time, so let's give her our.
Sorry.
And we have an 11 o'clock deadline, so make sure that we build in some time for discussion.
Yeah, no, I'm going to make it very clear. I have very clear slides for you, so you can just follow along, and you don't have to have, it'll be nice and painless, hopefully, for you. So I'm Christy Novak. I'm the coordinator of instructional technology. I'm here to just give slight highlights about the request for approval for a security camera contract that is on the board agenda for tonight, just to give you a little context and understanding, and then give you an opportunity to ask any questions if necessary. So why security cameras? So part of our original bond work, we actually proactively added cabling to think future forward and not thinking like, okay, we're going to do this first, and then, at some point we will be addressing likely cameras. And then that just came sooner than later, just given the environment, given the landscape, and then given the conversations that kind of occurred, especially after Uvalde, really kind of opened up the parent community to understanding like what are our safety and security. And this only helps to enhance what CC's end of the construction bond work is also doing in conjunction with that. But the main purpose is really, just for those perimeter, we have open fields, we have very open spaces, just to kind of give that perimeter, this is outdoor only cameras situation. And also security cameras do deter criminal activity, quite frankly, as well. And just kind of keeping people at bay from kind of being mischievous. And it can also help us with regards to issues. And we've encountered that in the past. For example, when we had the fire, the greenhouse fire at Ortega, like that would have been a perfect example model of being able to review footage to get a more accurate understanding of like who was responsible. Next, yes, selection process. So the 22-23 school year, I actually started this process in January of 22, just so you know. So it's been like a whole year of, talking, doing research, going through some demos. I've also always talked to other districts, kind of get a landscape, get an understanding of what is working and successful. So looked at several different camera companies. And then also, I did multiple site walks to determine the best locations for myself. And then with a vendor, I also went through a second site walk, and that's when we talk about the types of models of cameras that would best suit the needs of that type of thing. So really good information, and the folks that I did the site walk with were very knowledgeable. So that was good. And then it was then reviewed with my team as well for future feedback as well. So after going through that process over the past year, we have selected Verkada. Verkada is actually based out of San Mateo, which is nice as well because they are more local. But they are very active in the education space and really have a great integrated package that works for our needs the best. And that includes just the interface, how easy it is to use for non-technical people, because there will be non-technical people that will just need to be engaging with the dashboard. And just the idea of how they have their license structure and also the quality of their cameras. And just like looking down here and looking up there. So I'm going to go down really quick. These were parts of the site walks that we did, and I just kind of circled and just to give you a general idea. So each site actually turned out to be fairly even for the most part, but given campuses, they're a little different. And it really just depends on the angle. We chose a certain camera based on the kind of distance and kind of view that we want. So Sunset Ridge, we have a total of 8 cameras, and the total that is inclusive is including the installation as well. So just for that site, it would be $33,273. For Ortega, we have a total of 10 cameras, and definitely made sure that we were covering different aspects. Again, they have the wide field kind of situation going on, and so I wanted to make sure that we were good at being able to do that. So their cost was $38,360 for that site. For Ingrid B. Lacey, of course, a little bit more complicated. They have so many single individual silo buildings. So with the connections and everything, and it's just spread out. So we do have more cameras and a couple of different models. So just for the equipment, that'll just have additional costs. It would be $47,673. And then for Cabrillo, we have 9 cameras. And so this one, I just want to cite the reason why it's a higher cost is, as you know, Cabrillo has a whole separate field, right? And it's not connected to any type of thing. So we had a whole discussion like, how can we have at least something up there? Because that is just barren land, and it was brought up by the principal as well as an interest and a need. And so we are going to be putting in a special pole, and just being able to do a wireless bridge. So it just is a little extra money with that. I did talk about it with Cece, and she was in agreement that it was a good and wise decision. It was not overly cost effective, costly or anything like that. And Ocean Shore, we have 9 cameras, basically the same thing. Did the site walks, went around the perimeters, thought about, they have the main street, so that's a really big thing. They have the Ace Hardware, so that's an area to also, because it's just very open. So that cost would be $32,423. And then the district office is on the left side. And then Valamar is on the right side. And so you can see that for the district office, very nominal, just very basic. We are going to put one by that driveway, though, as people come out, and we'll have a special camera, so we're able to zoom in if needed. And then Valamar has a total of 10 cameras at $33,000. So we're looking at a district-wide total of 63 cameras. And this would be, of course, Measure O bond, because because this is part of the technology and just infrastructure update, it would be $258,000, $190.22 for all of this additional information, which would include, really the bulk of the cost is the hardware. And, you know, as an educational organization, we do get discounts. You know, this company is one of the vendors that you procure the cameras from. So that would include the hardware, the dashboard, the installation, training on the system, and licenses, because all of this is subscription-based. And so went for the 5 years, so we have that nice jump start right now while we have it, and then 5 years from now it's like, okay, then we have to renew. So that will be part of our ongoing budget work of like, okay, what's our technology landscape and what kind of money do we need to support like our ongoing costs. But 5 years is a great, I think, good number. And there's a 10-year warranty. Anything breaks, it gets replaced for free.
And that one other piece of information is that the reason this price isn't astronomical is because we did the wiring when we did the cabling of.
This would be an entirely different conversation and different contract, everything, if we had to do the cabling, and it would take so much longer. So, yes.
Okay, a couple of quick questions. The camera licenses, what does that mean? Why is that only 5 years versus the hardware warranty of 10?
So software licenses are actually on an annual basis, and so you can buy them at a year of license, or you can buy a 3 year. It's like it's for each camera, you need a software license. So in a lot of our technical equipment, we need to have, like, for an access point, we need to have a license. Okay. For a server, we need to have a software license that goes with it. So it's, even though you bought the hardware and it's there for you and you're done with that, you still have to support the hardware with the software and with that license on an annual basis.
And how much is the license part, do you know?
I'd have to relook at the specific breakdown of the license per year, but the 5 year was what I felt like was a good deal, considering you get, over time.
And then are you procuring this straight from, and I'm going to say the vendor's name wrong, but
So Verkada, actually, no, you go through actually a third party vendor. Okay. And so the company that is part of this contract is AMS, who did our original bond work. So we would procure the equipment through AMS, and they would do the installation as well.
I see.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, does the subscription include the storage of the actual data?
Yes, so that's a good question.
So that's also for the whole year, like they keep, so the subscription includes the video.
Yes, it's a cloud-based.
Cloud-based, so it includes that too.
Yeah, and just so
what we're paying for is the video, like we have it for a year. They save the videos for a year?
No, typically it's a 30-day retention, okay. And then it's deleted, and that's for security practices.
But that 5 year subscription includes the data?
Yes, it does.
Okay,
yeah.
I just want to make sure that
all inclusive of
the data is in that.
Yes, it's in the dashboard, and it's in the cloud. Yes.
And the very last question that I have is there somebody that's going to be looking at this?
So happy to kind of just understand, so you understand how kind of security cameras and work. So is anybody in the district office going to be sitting there like looking at a live feed? No, not that anybody has time either to do that. It's really there for reviewing if there was an incident or an investigation going on. You can go back to review that footage, type of a thing. Did that answer your question?
It did. I mean, I guess the question is, the school that I worked at, they used the security cameras in the office just to, it was on, the video cameras were on, so that you could kind of also look at it. It was nobody's job to man it, but it was just there. For
our reasons, we're only going to have external outdoor cameras. We're not going to have inside cameras. Okay. We're not at that phase in this district. But it would only be a designated person, so like a site principal would have access, and then recommend having another person, and then IT, in just only select people for privacy reasons. And there's a whole process about if you wanted to review footage, if there was a parent request, and I have all that spelled out in our board policy.
On the 10-year equipment warranty, you said if it breaks down, it would be replaced. What about if it's vandalized?
Vandalism is not included, so that would be.
I hear of a lot of places that have their security cameras.
Yeah, so these cameras, the ones we purchased, that we're looking to purchase are like, not specifically domed, so they're a little bit more like vandalized proof, and the way to be able to clean them. But people like to try and say like, oh, can I tear it down? I don't know. Let's see. So.
You have some video.
But then you'll have video.
But we'll have video. Exactly. So the choice is yours. You want to have video to try and take it down or not? But yes. So
I never thought we'd be having a discussion in Pacifica School District about security cameras. I just initially, even 2 years ago, said that's not very Pacifica. I think enough things have happened in this world that it's absolutely necessary.
And really, it's not an if, it's a when. I mean, that's the kind of the reality, I think, of what we're seeing in our world and also in just schools.
All right, are there any other questions? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the district entering into the proposed contract with AMS.net regarding the installation of security cameras on district campuses?
Sorry, I do have one more question.
Okay.
It's late, and sorry,
That's
I'm
okay.
I'm so sorry. But I assume the process, just given the size of this contract, did it go out to bid?
So we can talk about the contract. So for this type of situation, we did not need to go out to bid. If we were doing the cabling, we would have gone out to bid. Okay. But because we are only literally purchasing cameras, that is the majority of the hardware. The labor on this is nominal, and we are using what is called a piggyback contract. I did describe and define what that is in the memo if you need to just kind of review it. But in essence, this is a vetted contract that other educational organizations have used, and it's actually to our advantage because it does give us discounts. The advantage of the piggyback contract that we're using, actually, it says we do not have to, no shipping, so free shipping. So we're saving $3,000 off the bat because of this contract that we are actually using. And this contract also, I have a couple notes here. It's a competitive discount structure, and it really gives us a vehicle to be able to procure at a competitive rate in the marketplace. And other districts have used this, so it's a good contract to use.
And is the piggyback the reason why we didn't have to go out to bid?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I just have one. When would these be installed then?
So upon approval, if you approve it tonight, I will have a kickoff meeting probably very shortly thereafter. My goal, which I've already indicated to them, if this is to go forward, is to have this potentially completed by June. So on average, it could take anywhere between 3 and 4 months. But again, it's straightforward because it's just installation once we get the equipment, and then some testing and then training.
Would they be in continued use during the summer in case?
They will always be, yes, they're on all the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually one of our reasons why we're here tonight and not next week, is because if we can get them in before the summer, that would help us.
Yeah, just because of all the other projects and other things that are going on. As I I'm bored.
Another question?
Dad.
All right, do I have a motion to approve?
A motion to approve.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, Barbara, will you take the vote?
All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you so much.
All right, we're at 10:50, we're at future agenda items. I put them on the agenda because there were a number of things when I missed that meeting that were just reminders of things that we wanted to have. What I really need to do now is take this and go back with our cert schedule and see if I can refine them. These meetings, 11 o'clock are hard meetings, so if there are things that we can take off or not have so that we're getting closer to a 9:30 or 10 o'clock meeting, I think that seems reasonable because now we've done this work, but you all have to go to work tomorrow. So that's, so it's here. Anything else you want on the agenda? I assume that you want me to take things off the agenda if possible.
Yes, Will?
I was, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but the student achievement formative assessment is for February 8th. Because I had to back up a week, I'd like, if I can move that back to March 8th.
Okay.
That would be,
So let me look at that, comparing this to the search, and for me, and I'll work with the president, it's around prioritizing that, so that happens at the front of the agenda, and then if we can have less items on the agenda, I think that would be great.
All right, any other questions? I have stuff to say. Okay, all right,
Thank
with
you
that,
very
we
much.
adjourn
Thank
at
you. Thank you all for
10:52.
staying,
Done by 11.
suffering through all the questions.